It all began with a chilling accusation. "That's your punishment for stealing my dad from me." Callie's words echoed in my head as she forcefully dragged me toward the basement. I struggled, but Callie, younger and stronger, easily overpowered me. My heart raced as she shoved me into the cold, dark space. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone in eerie silence. The basement was damp, with a musty odor and a bone-chilling cold that crept into my skin. Panic began to set in as the darkness closed around me. I was trapped, and my mind spun with questions. What had just happened? Why was Callie so furious? How had our relationship become so twisted? Before I could process the gravity of it all, I felt something pressing against my thigh. Instinctively, I reached into my pocket and found my phone still there. A small relief, but it didn't erase the fear settling in my chest. My name is Olivia Anderson, and I'm 45 years old. Never in my wildest nightmares had I imagined I'd find myself in such a terrifying situation. I work as an administrative assistant, nothing too demanding, but it keeps me busy and content. My life, though simple and predictable, was fulfilling. I had a stable career, surrounded by colleagues who felt more like friends. But, despite all of this, one thing weighed heavily on my heart: I wasn't married. For years, I watched as friends found their soulmates, settled down, and built lives together. Every wedding invitation brought with it a mix of happiness and envy. I feared growing old alone, with no one to share my life with. No matter how much I tried to push it aside, immersing myself in work or attending social gatherings, a fear gnawed at me. Then, one day, everything changed when I met James Anderson. James was 9 years older than me, charming, kind, and attentive. He worked for one of our client companies, and we crossed paths often due to work. At first, we were cautious, but gradually, we grew closer. What began as casual, professional interactions soon blossomed into something more meaningful. We started dating, and after a few years, we decided to get married. It felt like a dream come true, a chance to finally have the family I had always longed for. But this dream came with its own set of challenges. James had a daughter from his previous marriage, a 17-year-old named Callie. From the beginning, Callie was distant and guarded. She adored her father and stuck by him every chance she got. I hoped that, in time, Callie and I would grow closer, that we could form a bond and become a real family. But that was just wishful thinking. After the wedding, I moved into the house James shared with Callie. I left my job to focus on being a homemaker, devoting myself to making our home as warm and inviting as possible. I cooked balanced meals, kept the house immaculate, and did everything I could to his life for both James and Callie. But no matter how hard I tried, Callie kept her distance. At first, I chalked it up to her being a teenager, moody and rebellious, as they often are. But as weeks turned into months, her coldness never wavered. She brushed off my attempts to connect, offering curt, one-word responses or sometimes no reply at all. The more I tried, the more she seemed to retreat, like a shadow slipping further out of reach. The only time Callie seemed truly at peace was when she was with her cat, Oliver, who was a chubby, mischievous cat who had been with James long before I came into the picture. Oliver was Callie's constant companion, and I often found her sitting in silence, stroking his fur. I couldn't help but envy the bond she shared with the cat, while I struggled to even get her to look me in the eye. Time passed, and despite my best efforts, the distance between us only grew. 5 years slipped by, and though we lived under the same roof, Callie remained a stranger to me. I didn't know her favorite foods, her hobbies, or what she dreamed about. The only thing I knew for sure was her deep love for Oliver, and that was a connection I could never seem to share. I couldn't seem to replicate the connection Callie had with Oliver. Then one day, out of the blue, Callie spoke to me. I was startled. It was the first time she had ever initiated a conversation. "How long are you planning to stay in this house?" she asked, her tone sharp and cold. I was taken aback. "What do you mean? How long are you going to stay here? Can't you leave soon? You're in the way," she said bluntly. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had worked so hard to make this house a home, to be part of this family, and now Callie was telling me to leave. I stood there, speechless, stunned by her hostility. Callie continued, her voice dripping with bitterness. I love my dad. It was just the two of us before you came along. I can't stand you being here, pretending to be my mother. I wanted to say something, anything, to defend myself, but the words wouldn't come. All I could think was, how had it come to this? What had I done to make Callie hate me so much? Callie's next words cut even deeper. I thought if I ignored you long enough, you'd get the hint and leave, but you're still here, acting like everything's fine. You're not my mother, and you'll never be, so just, go. Tears welled up in my eyes. I had tried so hard to be kind, to be patient, but nothing I did seemed to matter. Callie's harsh words echoed in my mind long after she stormed off, leaving me alone in the kitchen. From that day forward, Callie's treatment of me grew even crueler. She criticized everything I did in cooking, my attempts to make conversation, and made it painfully clear that she wanted nothing to do with me. It was like living with a stranger who resented my very existence. The worst part was, in front of James, Callie put on a facade. She acted like the perfect daughter, hiding the venom she reserved just for me. Whenever James was around, Callie transformed. She acted sweet and polite, praising my cooking and pretending to be the perfect daughter. But the moment he was out of earshot, her coldness returned, sharper than ever. The insults came back in full force, and I felt trapped in a nightmare with no way out. I wanted to talk to James, to tell him what was really happening, but each time I tried, I lost my nerve. He was always so busy with work, and I didn't want to add to his stress by burdening him with my problems. So, I kept quiet, hoping that maybe, somehow, things would improve, but they never did. 6 years after we got married, Callie graduated from high school and found a job at a company nearby. Around the same time, James began taking more frequent business trips. At first, he would be gone for just a few days, but soon, his trips stretched into weeks at a time. With James away, Callie's behavior became unbearable. She criticized everything I did, from the way I cleaned the house to the meals I prepared. Every day, she found something new to complain about, and her words cut deeper and deeper. Then one day, I reached my breaking point. Callie had just insulted my cooking again, leaving her meal untouched before storming off to pet Oliver. I couldn't take it anymore. Just get out, I yelled, my voice shaking with anger. You're always telling me to leave, but maybe it's you who should go. You have a job, you have money we don't, you just move out and live on your own. Callie looked shocked, clearly unprepared for me to fight back. For a brief moment, she seemed at a loss for words, but then, her expression twisted in fury. What did you just say? She spat, her eyes narrowing. You can kick me out. This is my house too. Then stop treating me like a stranger. I shot back. I'm tired of being your punching bag. If you can stand me, maybe it's time you moved on. A tense silence followed, but before I could react, Callie lunged at me, grabbing my arm and squeezing it painfully. Ouch, I cried, trying to pull away, but her grip was too strong. She dragged me out of the kitchen and down the hall, completely ignoring my protests. Let go of me, I yelled, but Callie was unwavering. She dragged me towards the basement, her face set with grim determination. Before I could react, she shoved me inside and slammed the door shut. I was left in darkness, stunned and terrified. What was she going to do? How long would she leave me here? My heart raced as I pounded on the door, pleading for Callie to let me out, but there was no response. In the cold, dark basement, panic began to consume me. My head spun with fear and confusion. I couldn't believe this was happening. Callie had locked me up like a criminal, all because of her intense hatred. What had I done to deserve this? As the hours dragged on, my panic grew. I searched desperately for a way out, but the basement was solidly constructed, with no windows or escape routes. The walls seemed to close in on me, making me feel suffocated. Then I remembered the phone in my pocket. With trembling hands, I pulled it out and quickly dialed my friend Linda's number. Linda, it's Olivia, I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. I need your help. Linda arrived at my house within minutes. She pried open the basement door and helped me out, her face etched with concern. Are you okay? She asked, guiding me to her car. I nodded, though I couldn't stop shaking. Callie, she locked me in there, I said, my voice trembling. I don't know what she was thinking. Linda shook her head, her expression resolute. Let's get you out of here, she said, starting the car. You can stay with me until James gets back. As we drove away, a mixture of relief and dread filled me. I was safe for now, but what would happen when James found out? Would he believe me? Would Callie try to turn him against me? When we reached Linda's house, I sent James a message explaining what had happened. A few hours later, he called, his voice filled with concern. Olivia, are you okay? I'm coming home right now. James, you don't have to, I started. No, I want to, he insisted. I'll be there in a few hours. Just stay with Linda until I get there. True to his word, James arrived later that night. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were filled with worry. Olivia, I'm so sorry, he said, pulling me into a hug. I should have been there. I should have known something was wrong. It's not your fault, I said, trying to hold back tears. Callie's been hiding this from you. I didn't want to worry you, but I can't take it anymore, I said, my voice trembling. James nodded, his expression grim. We need to talk to Callie. This can't go on. The next day, we returned home, bracing ourselves for the confrontation with Callie. When she arrived, she looked taken aback to see James there. Dad, what are you doing here? She asked, her surprise evident. We need to talk, James said, his voice firm. What you did to Olivia was unacceptable. Callie's face twisted with defiance. She deserved it. She stole you from me. That's no excuse, James replied, his tone resolute. You put her life in danger. Do you understand how serious this is? Callie's defiance wavered, but she still tried to justify herself. I just wanted her to leave. I never meant to hurt her. But you did, I said quietly, stepping forward. Callie, I never wanted to replace your mother. I just wanted us to be a family. But you've made it clear that you don't want that. Tears filled Callie's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. So what now? Are you going to kick me out? James sighed, running a hand through his hair. Callie, I love you, but you can't stay here if you're going to keep hurting Olivia. You need to get help. Maybe some time apart will help you see things more clearly. Callie stared at him, her expression a mix of anger and sadness. You're choosing her over me. I'm choosing what's best for everyone, James said gently. I want you to get better, to find a way to be happy, but that won't happen if you stay here and keep lashing out. After a long silence, Callie finally nodded. Fine, I'll go, but don't expect me to forgive either of you, Callie said, her voice cold. With that, she turned and walked out of the house, leaving us standing there in stunned silence. The tension that had plagued us for years seemed to dissolve, replaced by a heavy, lingering sadness. For the next few days, James and I were in a state of shock. We had hoped for a resolution, but instead, we were left with the fragments of a broken family. Callie moved into a small apartment nearby, and while James made an effort to stay in touch, the distance between us all was palpable. Life slowly returned to a new normal. James and I focused on rebuilding our relationship, finding solace in the quiet moments we shared. Oliver, sensing the change, became even more affectionate, curling up beside us as we Saturday on the sofa in the evenings. One day, as we watched the sunset together, James turned to me and said, "Thank you for staying strong, Olivia. I know this hasn't been easy." "It hasn't been easy for you either," I replied, squeezing his hand. "But we're in this together. We'll get through it." As weeks turned into months, we began to heal. Callie reached out occasionally, apologizing for her behavior and updating us on her life. She had started seeing a counselor, and though there was still a long road ahead, it was a step in the right direction. The house felt lighter without the constant tension. James and I rediscovered the joy of being together, taking long walks, planning weekend trips, and spending lazy afternoons talking and laughing. It felt like a second honeymoon, a chance to rebuild our lives and our love. Though the pain of the past lingered, we were determined to move forward. We had weathered the storm and emerged stronger on the other side. With each passing day, the future looked a little brighter.
The raffle ticket trembled between my fingers as Dr. Stevens called out the winning numbers. One by one, they matched mine, each digit a tiny explosion in my chest. When he announced I'd won the luxury Napa Valley getaway, I couldn't stop grinning. 2 nights at the Golden Valley Resort, wine tastings, spa treatments, everything Brandon and I desperately needed. Congratulations, Joy. My coworker Adam clapped me on the back. About time something good happened around here. I clutched the golden envelope to my chest, already imagining Brandon's face when I surprised him. We hadn't taken a real vacation since our honeymoon 3 years ago. Between his demanding sales job and his mother's constant emergencies, we barely had time for date nights anymore. He's going to flip, I said, more to myself than Adam. In a good way, I hope. Adam's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He'd heard enough of my marriage troubles over lunch breaks to fill a therapy session. I rushed home early, stopping to pick up Brandon's favorite takeout and a bottle of champagne. The house was quiet when I walked in. No mother-in-law camping on our couch or calling with her latest crisis. Perfect. Brandon came home late, as usual. His tie was loose, dark circles under his eyes. "Hey, babe," he mumbled, barely looking up from his phone. "I have amazing news." I set out the food, poured champagne. "Remember that company raffle?" He glanced up briefly. "The charity thing? I won. 2 nights at Golden Valley Resort in Napa, all expenses paid. Just you and me, next weekend." I held out the envelope like an offering. Brandon's fingers froze on his phone. "Next weekend? Yes, isn't it perfect? We can finally have that romantic getaway we've been talking about." He set his phone down slowly. "Joy, Mom's having her knee surgery next weekend. I told you I needed to be there for her recovery." The champagne bubbles turned sour in my stomach. "That's just a minor outpatient procedure. The doctor said she'd be fine in a day." "She needs me there. You know how she gets anxious about medical stuff since Dad died." "She has a whole church group ready to help her. And Tom—" "Don't bring up Tom." Brandon's voice hardened. "He abandoned her. I won't do the same thing." I took a deep breath. What if you took her instead of me?" The words felt like betrayal in my mouth, but I had to know. Brandon's face lit up. "That's perfect. Mom would love it. She's always wanted to visit wine country." The room spun slightly. "I was joking, Brandon. The prize is for couples. I won it. I want to go with my husband." "Don't be selfish, Joy. Mom needs this more than we do. She's been so lonely lately." "Selfish?" The word hit like a slap. "I'm selfish for wanting 2 days alone with my husband?" Brandon stood up, food untouched. "If you can't understand how much Mom needs me right now, maybe we need to rethink some things." "What things?" "This marriage, our priorities." He grabbed his keys. "I'm going to check on Mom. Don't wait up." The front door slammed, leaving me alone with cooling takeout and flat champagne. My phone buzzed. A text from Grace. "How'd he take the news?" I stared at the golden envelope, now crumpled in my fist. 3 years of putting Linda first. 3 years of canceled dates and interrupted moments. 3 years of watching my marriage dissolve into a twisted threesome I never signed up for. My fingers flew across the phone. "You free for coffee? I need to talk about revenge." Grace stirred her coffee with calculated precision, her eyes fixed on me across the diner booth. "He actually suggested taking his mother instead of you?" I pushed my untouched eggs around the plate. "You know what kills me? 5 years ago, Brandon would have never done this. Remember our wedding? He actually told Linda to back off when she tried to plan the whole thing herself." "I remember." "What changed?" The question hung between us like smoke. My mind drifted to our first anniversary when Brandon surprised me with a weekend in Seattle. We made it halfway there before Linda called, claiming chest pains. By the time we got to the emergency room, she was chatting with nurses about their children. Nothing wrong with her heart, just a panic attack, they said. "Everything changed after his father died," I said. "It's like Brandon's terrified of losing her too." Grace's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then her eyes widened. "Speaking of Linda, isn't that her?" I turned. Through the diner's front window, I watched my mother-in-law stride into the boutique across the street, looking remarkably spry for someone facing knee surgery next week. "Let's follow her," Grace said, already reaching for her purse. "What? No, that's exactly what we're doing." She threw down cash for our breakfast. Come on, Nancy Drew. We crossed the street, ducking into the boutique. Linda stood at a rack of designer dresses, holding up a sequined number that cost more than my monthly car payment. Can you believe Brandon? She was saying into her phone. Trying to waste that lovely prize on Joy when he knows I've always wanted to see wine country? Yes, I know the knee thing was last minute, but it worked, didn't it? My stomach clenched. Grace grabbed my arm, steadying me. Of course I feel bad, Linda continued, but what choice do I have? Ever since his father died, I've had to get creative to keep him close. You should have seen how he used to be with her, Sarah. Like I didn't even exist. The dress slipped from my numb fingers, hitting the floor with a soft thud. Linda spun around. Our eyes met. I'll call you back, she said quickly, ending the call. Her face transformed, concern replacing calculation. Joy, what a surprise. I was just looking for something to wear after my surgery. Funny, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. I thought you'd be resting that knee. Oh, the doctor said light activity is good for circulation. She smiled, but her eyes darted toward the exit. I should get going. So much to do before next week. Like planning your wine tour? The color drained from her face. I don't know what you think you heard. I heard enough. I stepped closer. You're not having surgery at all, are you? Now, Joy, don't jump to conclusions. Brandon wouldn't like... Brandon isn't here. My voice dropped lower. But I am, and I heard everything. Linda's facade cracked. You don't understand. After Robert died, Brandon was all I had left. Then you came along, and suddenly he had someone else to care about. Do you know what that's like? To watch someone you love choose someone else? Yeah, Linda, I do. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. Please don't tell him, she whispered. He wouldn't understand. Grace appeared at my side, phone in hand. Too late, I recorded everything. Linda's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't dare. I thought about Brandon, about our ruined Seattle trip, about countless dinners interrupted by his mother's emergencies, about the way he looked at me last night, choosing her over me without hesitation. You're right, I said. I won't tell him? Yet. But that Napa trip, it's staying mine, and if you try to interfere, Brandon will hear exactly how creative you've gotten at keeping him close. I turned and walked out, Grace beside me, leaving Linda clutching her designer dress like a shield. Outside, my hands shook as I gulped the cool morning air. That was badass, Grace said softly. What now? I watched Linda hurry out of the boutique, phone already pressed to her ear. Now we start planning that trip to Napa, and this time, I'm not taking no for an answer. The bank statement trembled in my hands as I stared at the series of transfers. $2,000 last month, $1,500 the month before, all to an account I didn't recognize. Our savings had been hemorrhaging money for months, and I'd finally discovered why. I called the bank. 5 minutes later, I had my answer. The account belonged to Linda Parker. The front door clicked open. Brandon walked in, whistling. He froze when he saw me at the kitchen table, papers spread out like evidence at a crime scene. You're home early, he said. Funny thing about that. I held up the statement. I had to leave work when the mortgage company called. Apparently, we're 2 months behind on payments. The whistle died on his lips. I can explain. Please do. Explain why you've been sending thousands to your mother while we default on our house. She needed help with medical bills. What medical bills, Brandon? The fake knee surgery? The words shot out before I could stop them. His face darkened. What are you talking about? I saw her yesterday, shopping for designer dresses, strutting around like a runway model. Some knee problem. You're spying on my mother now? No, I'm discovering how deep her manipulation goes. And yours. Brandon slumped into a chair. It's not what you think. After Dad died, after your father died, you became her emotional husband. I get it. But stealing from our future? That's crossing a line. I didn't steal anything. It's our money. Our money? When was the last time you consulted me about our money? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. My phone buzzed. A text from Grace. Found Tom's number. Want it? Brandon noticed my expression change. Who's that? Your brother. He shot up from his chair. Stay away from Tom. He doesn't understand our family. Maybe he understands more than you think. I stood, gathering the bank statements. I'm going to Grace's tonight. Don't wait up. Joy, wait. He grabbed my arm. Mom needs us. She's all alone. And whose fault is that? I yanked free. Did you ever wonder why Tom left? Why your father spent so much time at work? Why I'm leaving right now? You're not leaving. We can fix this. Can we? Because from where I'm standing, there are 3 people in this marriage, and I'm the only one being honest. I walked out, my heart hammering. In my car, I texted Grace back. Send Tom's number. Time to hear the other side of this story. An hour later, I sat across from Tom Parker in a quiet bar on the edge of town. He looked like Brandon, but harder, weathered by years of choosing freedom over family obligation. So, he said, studying his whiskey, little brother's following in mother's footsteps. What do you mean? The money thing. It's how she controlled Dad, too. Emotional blackmail backed by financial manipulation. She'd spend recklessly, then cry about bills until he gave in. When he finally stood up to her, he trailed off. What happened? Heart attack at 55. Stress, the doctor said. But I knew better. Tom's knuckles whitened around his glass. Brandon was always her favorite, more pliable. After Dad died, I tried to warn him. He chose her side. Haven't spoken since. My phone lit up with Brandon's 10th message. Please come home. We can work this out. You know what the worst part is? Tom continued. She's not evil. She's just empty. Nothing's ever enough. Not Dad's love, not my independence, not Brandon's devotion, and now, not your marriage. How did you break free? He smiled grimly. I realized something. Sometimes loving someone means walking away, letting them face the consequences of their choices. I thought about the Napa tickets sitting in my purse, about Brandon's ultimatum, about years of putting Linda first. I have an idea, I said slowly, but I'll need your help. Tom leaned forward. I'm listening. It's time for a family reunion, one that forces everyone to face the truth, even if it breaks us all. 3 days at Grace's house turned into a week. Brandon's calls became less frequent, his messages shorter. Each one ended the same way. Mom needs me, never I need you, or come home. I threw myself into work, but even there, I couldn't escape. Adam caught me crying in the break room, staring at an old photo on my phone. Brandon and me in Seattle before we turned back. You look different there, Adam said, sliding a coffee across the table. Happy? I tried to smile. Real? He hesitated. Listen, there's something you should know. I overheard Brandon on a call yesterday during the client meeting. My stomach tightened. Brandon hadn't mentioned any meeting. He was talking about selling stocks, Adam continued. Something about needing quick cash for a down payment. Down payment? The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. What down payment? On a condo, for his mother. The mug slipped from my hands, shattering against the floor. Coffee spread like blood across the tiles. Joy, I have to go. I grabbed my purse, leaving the mess behind. 20 minutes later, I sat in our investment advisor's office, watching him pull up our accounts. The numbers confirmed my worst fears. Brandon had liquidated almost everything. The transfer started 3 months ago, the advisor explained. Mr. Parker said you were both aware. We weren't both anything. I stood up, the room spinning slightly. Thank you for your time. Outside, I called Tom. Did you know about the condo? What condo? The one your brother's buying for Linda, with our retirement funds. Silence crackled across the line. Then, meet me at Murphy's, now. At the bar, Tom nursed a scotch while I paced. She did this before, he said finally, right before Dad died. Convinced him to buy her a vacation house in Florida. Said she needed somewhere to heal after her imaginary cancer scare. Cancer scare? One of her greatest hits. Lasted 6 months. Miraculous recovery, of course. He laughed bitterly. Dad died before the closing. Heart attack, remember? The stress of refinancing everything. My phone buzzed. Brandon again? This time, I answered. Where are you? His voice was tight. Mom's worried sick. Is she, or is she too busy condo shopping? The line went quiet. Who told you? Does it matter? Were you going to tell me before or after you emptied our accounts? You don't understand? No, you don't understand. I just left our investment advisor's office. You didn't just take our savings, Brandon. You took our future. Mom needs security after everything she's been through. Everything she's been through? My voice rose. What about what she's put us through? What about what she did to your father? Don't bring him into this. Why not? Because you might realize you're following his footsteps right into an early grave. Tom flinched beside me. I'm doing what's right, Brandon said. If you can't support that? If I can't support that, what? You'll leave me? Newsflash, Brandon. You left this marriage a long time ago. I just didn't want to admit it. I hung up before he could respond. Tom watched me carefully. What now? He asked. My phone lit up with a text from Grace. Found you an apartment, 3-month lease available immediately. Another message popped up, this one from Linda. Please don't destroy my family. Brandon needs me. I stared at the words, feeling something shift inside me. Not sadness anymore, not even anger. Something colder, more focused. Now? I looked at Tom. Now we stop playing defense. You said Linda had a miracle recovery from her cancer scare? He nodded slowly. I bet there are medical records, or rather, a lack of them. Records that might interest Brandon's therapist, or his lawyer. Joy, she wants to play games with people's lives? Fine, but I'm done being a pawn. I stood up, steadier than I'd felt in weeks. It's time to show Linda what happens when you push someone too far. Tom's expression darkened with recognition. You sound like Dad, right before the end. Good, I said, reaching for my keys. Because this is the end, just not the one Linda's expecting. The hospital records lay scattered across Grace's dining room table like pieces of a twisted puzzle. Tom's contact at County General had come through. Every medical file for Linda Parker over the past decade. Nothing, Grace said, shuffling through papers. No cancer screenings, no serious illnesses, just routine checkups and... She paused, frowning at a document. What? Psychiatric referrals, lots of them, all declined. My phone buzzed. Brandon. Coming home tonight, we need to talk about the condo. I ignored it, focusing on the papers. Look at these dates. The first referral was right after your father died, I said to Tom. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. 2 weeks before she claimed she found the lump. The imaginary lump that convinced your father to buy that house. And nearly bankrupted him doing it? Tom's jaw tightened. History repeating itself. Grace's doorbell rang. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Linda's silver Mercedes. Perfect timing, I muttered, grabbing the files. Let's see how she handles her own medical history. But when Grace opened the door, it wasn't Linda who stepped inside. It was Brandon. Mom's in the car, he said quickly. She doesn't know I'm here. His eyes locked onto the papers in my hands. What are those? Your mother's greatest performances. I held up a psychiatric referral. Tell me, did she ever mention these? You had no right. Like you had no right to drain our accounts? I stepped closer. Your father died because of her games, Brandon, and you're following the same path. Dad died of a heart attack. After months of financial stress and emotional manipulation, just like what she's doing to you now. Brandon's face flushed. The condo is an investment? It's a trap, just like the Florida house was for your father, just like this marriage has become for me. Joy, I'm going to Napa next weekend, I cut him off. With or without you, but first you need to see something. I handed him the psychiatric referrals. His hands trembled as he read. Multiple recommendations for treatment of factitious disorder, he mumbled. Tendency to fabricate medical conditions for attention and control. A car horn blared outside, Linda growing impatient. She needs help, Brandon. Real help, not enabling. He looked up, tears in his eyes. What am I supposed to do? Choose. Right now. Stay here. Read these files, face the truth, or go back to that car and keep pretending. The horn sounded again, longer this time. She's waiting, I said softly. Brandon stared at the papers, then at me. For a moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I'd married. strong, independent, capable of standing up to his mother's manipulation. Then his phone buzzed. Linda's text lit up the screen. "I'm feeling dizzy. Please hurry." Just like that, the glimmer vanished. He set the papers down. "I can't leave her alone like this." "Like what? Perfectly healthy but desperate for attention?" "You don't understand." "No, you don't understand. This ends now. Either you stay and face reality or I'm done. And I'm taking everything we have left to court." Brandon stepped back, shaking his head. "You wouldn't." "Try me. I've got 3 years of financial records and a stack of medical files that prove elder abuse by proxy. How do you think a judge will view that?" The horn blared a third time. Brandon looked at the door, then back at me. "I'm sorry," he whispered and walked out. I watched through the window as he got into the Mercedes. As they drove away, Tom placed a hand on my shoulder. "Now what?" I picked up my phone, dialing my lawyer's number. "Now we do this my way. Book your ticket to Napa, Tom. It's time for that family reunion we discussed." "Joy," Grace warned. "Revenge won't fix this." "This isn't about revenge anymore." I watched the Mercedes disappear around the corner. "It's about survival, and I'm done being the victim in Linda Parker's tragedy." The Napa Valley sunset painted everything gold, but I felt nothing but cold as I watched Brandon's car pull into the resort parking lot. Linda sat in the passenger seat, exactly where I should have been. "Right on schedule," Tom muttered beside me. "Mom never could resist crashing a party." I clutched the envelope containing the medical records. "Did you send the anonymous tip?" "Called the front desk an hour ago. They think she's here for a surprise anniversary celebration." Brandon helped Linda out of the car, her movements deliberately slow and fragile. The same act she'd perfected during her cancer scare, now recycled for a new audience. "Show time," I whispered, stepping into view. Brandon froze. Linda's hand flew to her chest, her signature move when feeling faint. "Joy?" Brandon's voice cracked. "What are you doing here?" "Enjoying my prize. The question is, what are you doing here, with her?" Linda swayed dramatically. "Brandon, I'm feeling dizzy." "Drop the act, Linda." Tom emerged from the shadows. "We've seen this performance before." The color drained from Linda's face. "Tom, Brandon, what's happening?" "That's what I'd like to know." Brandon looked between us, lost. "Why are you both?" "Because someone needs to stop this." I opened the envelope. "Remember these, Linda? The psychiatric referrals you ignored? The ones from right before Robert's death?" Linda straightened, her fragility act forgotten. "Those are private." "Like the private accounts Brandon's been funding? Or the private conversations about the condo?" "Joy, please." Brandon stepped forward. "This isn't the place." "It's exactly the place. Where else could I get you both away from your carefully constructed reality?" "You're making a scene," Linda hissed. "No, I'm making a point." I turned to Brandon. "Your father died because of her manipulation. Tom left because he couldn't take it anymore. And now you're throwing away our marriage for what? Another of her fabricated emergencies?" Brandon's phone buzzed. Probably the front desk about the surprise celebration. He ignored it, staring at the medical files in my hands. "Mom?" His voice was small, uncertain. "What are they talking about?" Linda's mask cracked. "They're trying to turn you against me, just like Tom did. Just like your father." "Don't you dare mention Dad," Tom snapped. "You killed him with your games." "I loved him." "You consumed him," I corrected. "Like you're consuming Brandon." Brandon stepped back, shaking his head. "This isn't... I can't..." "Choose Brandon," I said quietly. "Right here, right now. Your mother's lies or the truth." Linda grabbed his arm. "I'm your mother. I need you..." "No," I cut in. "You want him. There's a difference." Brandon looked at the files, at his brother, at me. For a moment, I saw clarity in his eyes. Then Linda collapsed. Not her usual delicate swoon, but a full theatrical fall. Brandon caught her automatically, years of conditioning taking over. "Mom! Mom! Call an ambulance!" Linda gasped. My heart... I watched Brandon transform back into the dutiful son, all clarity vanishing as he cradled his mother. Tom's hand found my shoulder. "Joy, don't..." I stepped back, something breaking inside me. I'm done. Brandon looked up, torn. Joy, please, I have to. Take care of her, I know. I dropped the medical files at his feet. You always do. Linda's eyes met mine through her performance, triumphant. She'd won again. I turned away, my carefully planned confrontation crumbling like sand. Behind me, I heard Brandon calling for help. Linda's theatrical moans, Tom's disgusted sigh. In my pocket, my phone buzzed with a text from Grace. How did it go? I watched the golden sunset fade to purple, thinking of all the years I'd wasted fighting a battle that was rigged from the start. Some people don't want to be saved from their demons. Sometimes they prefer the familiar chains to uncertain freedom. It's over, I typed back. Time to let go. The ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, a fitting soundtrack to the death of my marriage. I walked away from the scene, leaving Brandon to his chosen fate. Behind me, Linda's performance reached its crescendo, but I didn't look back. Some victories only come through surrender. The emergency room buzzed with fluorescent intensity as I strode past the nurse's station. Linda's latest performance had landed her in the cardiac ward, though her preliminary tests showed nothing wrong. Of course. I found her alone in room 412, Brandon presumably off fetching her another blanket or ice chip or whatever else she'd demanded. She looked smaller in the hospital bed, more vulnerable, but her eyes were sharp as ever when they met mine. Come to gloat, she asked. No, I came to give you this. I placed a worn leather journal on her bedside table. Found it in Robert's old briefcase. Tom kept it all these years. Linda's hand trembled as she reached for it. Robert's diary? His suicide note, essentially. Every manipulation, every fake illness, every financial drain, he documented it all. Right up until the day his heart gave out. She withdrew her hand as if burned. You're lying. Read it yourself. Page 47 is particularly interesting. The day you first mentioned that non-existent lump. The hospital machinery beeped steadily as Linda stared at the journal. You don't understand what it's like, she whispered. To watch your children slip away. To feel yourself becoming unnecessary. So you make yourself necessary through lies? Through emotional blackmail? I keep my family close. You keep them trapped. And now you're doing it to Brandon. She lifted her chin. Brandon loves me. Brandon fears you. There's a difference. I moved closer. But here's what you should fear. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I'm taking what's left of our money, all traceable to your fake emergencies. And this journal, copies are going to Brandon's therapist and lawyer. He'll never believe. Maybe not at first, but seeds of doubt are funny things. They grow. Just ask Tom. Footsteps approached, Brandon returning. Linda's face contorted with panic. What do you want? She hissed. Get help, real help, the kind those psychiatric referrals suggested years ago, or I'll make sure Brandon sees exactly what happened to his father. Brandon appeared in the doorway, clutching a cup of ice chips. He froze, looking between us. Everything okay? He asked cautiously. I turned to leave, but Linda's voice stopped me. Wait. She was crying now, real tears this time. Brandon, there's something I need to tell you. I watched the scene unfold, Linda confessing to her lies, Brandon's face crumpling as she described the years of manipulation, the truth about his father's death, the fabricated illnesses, the financial destruction. I couldn't bear to lose you too, she finished. Brandon sat heavily in the visitor's chair, his world reshaping itself around this new reality. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. All this time, I'm sorry, Linda whispered. I'll get help. I promise. Just don't leave me alone. Brandon looked at me, then back at his mother. I saw the choice weighing on him, the same choice his father never got to make. You won't be alone, Mom, he said finally, but you need help, professional help, and I need time. He stood up, shoulders straight for the first time in years. Joy, I'll be at Grace's, I said softly. When you're ready to talk. Linda called out as I reached the door. I really am sorry, for everything. I turned back one last time. I know, that's why I brought the journal instead of sending it straight to Brandon. Everyone deserves one chance to choose truth over lies. In the hallway, Tom waited by the elevator. "How'd it go?" "Better than revenge," I said. "She's finally facing herself." "And Brandon?" I watched through the window as Brandon held his mother's hand, both of them crying now, not from manipulation, but from truth. "He's facing himself too. Sometimes that's the hardest battle of all." The elevator doors opened. As we stepped in, I heard Linda ask for her psychiatrist referral papers. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in destroying your enemy, but in helping them find their way back to humanity, even if that means letting go of your own need for revenge. The Italian sun warmed my face as I sipped espresso at the small cafe in Florence. Grace had insisted on this trip. Healing through carbs, she called it. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom, a photo of Linda at her therapy session, actually showing up this time. Progress, however small. "Another postcard?" Grace nodded at the blank card on our table. "Last one. I'd been writing them throughout our trip, not to send, but to say the things I needed to say. This one was for Brandon." The waiter brought our bill just as my phone buzzed again. Brandon's name lit up the screen, his first contact since signing the divorce papers 3 weeks ago. "The condo sale went through," his message read, "using the money for Mom's treatment instead." I set the phone down, letting the weight of those words settle. No accusations, no guilt trips, just truth. The one thing that had been missing from our marriage for so long. "You okay?" Grace asked. "Better than okay." I picked up my pen, finally knowing what to write on that last postcard. Not about revenge or justice or even forgiveness. Something simpler, more honest. A shadow fell across our table. I looked up to find Adam, his familiar pragmatic smile somehow softer in the Tuscan light. "Fancy meeting you here," he said. Grace's eyes widened. "Did you—" "I might have mentioned our itinerary to him," I admitted. Sometimes the best way forward is with someone who saw you clearly all along. Adam pulled up a chair, ordered an espresso in surprisingly decent Italian. We talked about everything and nothing. Work, travel, the way life surprises you when you stop trying to control it. My phone buzzed one more time, a message from Linda. "Thank you for the journal, for giving me a chance to choose differently. I thought about revenge, about how I'd wanted to destroy her, to make her feel as trapped as I had. But in the end, the greatest victory wasn't in tearing someone down. It was in finding the strength to walk away, to let them face their own demons while you face your future." "There's this little vineyard in Chianti," Adam said, his knee brushing mine under the table. "If you're interested." Grace kicked me softly, grinning. I looked at the postcard, still blank except for Brandon's name. What do you say to someone who is both your greatest love and your hardest lesson? In the end, I wrote just 3 words. Choose yourself first. The waiter returned with Adam's coffee, asking if we needed anything else. I caught my reflection in the window, no longer the woman who'd won that Napa Valley trip, desperate to save a marriage that was already gone. Someone stronger now. Someone who understood that sometimes the happy ending isn't about winning or losing, but about finding the courage to write your own story. "Actually," I said, both to the waiter and to whatever twist of fate had brought me here, "we'll take another round. We're celebrating." "What are we celebrating?" Adam asked. I tucked the postcard into my bag, unsigned. Some words don't need to be sent to be heard. "New chapters," I said, raising my cup. "And the art of letting go." Grace and Adam lifted their cups too, the afternoon sun turning everything to gold. Somewhere back home, Brandon was learning to set boundaries, Linda was facing her fears in therapy, and Tom was rebuilding bridges he'd thought forever burned. And here, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. Not because I'd won or lost, but because I'd finally understood that the greatest act of revenge against a life that's trapped you is to simply set yourself free. The espresso was bitter and perfect on my tongue, tasting like truth, like possibility, like the kind of peace that comes not from victory, but from finally, completely, letting go.
I found it beneath my pillow, a small silver hoop earring with a dangling pearl. Not mine. Never mine. The sight of it made my stomach twist into familiar knots, the kind that signal your world is about to implode but your brain hasn't caught up yet. I'm Brooke, and until this moment, I'd been playing the role of the perfect wife in this pristine suburban nightmare. Funny how a tiny piece of jewelry can shatter years of carefully maintained denial. Honey, have you seen my blue tie? Ryan's voice drifted up from downstairs, casual and unbothered, like always. Like he hadn't just destroyed everything. Check the laundry room, I called back, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I rolled the earring between my fingers, feeling its weight, so light, yet somehow heavy enough to crush me. Found it. He sounded pleased with himself. Always so pleased with himself. I heard his footsteps on the stairs and quickly slipped the earring into my pocket. Ryan appeared in the doorway, adjusting his tie with practiced precision. Big case today. Probably won't be home until late. Again? I raised an eyebrow, watching him smooth down his already perfect hair in the mirror. Your mother called. She's expecting us for dinner on Sunday. He barely flickered. Did you tell her we're busy? No, because we're not. I moved closer, straightening his collar. Close enough to smell his cologne, to see the slight tension in his jaw. Unless there's another late meeting. Don't start, Brooke. He caught my hand, squeezed it just a little too hard. You know how important this case is. I pulled away, forcing a smile. Of course. The Morrison divorce, right? Thompson merger, he corrected, too quickly. The Morrison case wrapped up last week. My mistake. I turned away, organizing the already pristine dresser top. Give my best to Mrs. Morrison. Or Thompson. Whoever's keeping you late tonight. His reflection in the mirror stiffened. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. I picked up his discarded pajama pants, folded them with precise corners. Just being a supportive wife. Isn't that what your mother's always saying I should be? Ryan checked his watch, already dismissing the conversation. I don't have time for this. We'll talk later. Will we? But he was already gone, his footsteps echoing down the stairs. I waited until I heard the garage door close, then pulled out the earring again. Such a delicate thing. Probably expensive, Ryan always did have expensive taste. In the morning light, the pearls seemed to mock me, gleaming with secrets I wasn't supposed to know. My phone buzzed. Elena, coffee? You sound weird in your texts. I typed back, can't. Errands. Then added, actually, yes. Meet me at Riverside Cafe in 30. Her response was immediate, on my way. Bring whatever's making you text like a crazy person at 8 a.m. I slipped the earring into an envelope, grabbed my purse, and headed for the door. As I passed the hall mirror, I caught my reflection, perfectly styled hair, carefully applied makeup. Designer clothes chosen to please my mother-in-law's critical eye. The woman staring back at me looked exactly like what Ryan wanted, the trophy wife, the perfect accessory to his successful life. That woman was about to become his biggest mistake. I pulled out my phone again and opened my banking app. Time to see exactly how many late meetings my husband had been expensing lately. Ryan taught me well, document everything, trust no one, and always be 3 steps ahead. Let's see how he likes having those lessons turned against him. The Sunday dinner table at the Davis household always felt like a courtroom, with Deborah as judge and jury. Tonight, the china clinked with particular menace as she served her signature pot roast. Her eyes fixed on the empty chair where Ryan should have been. Another late meeting? She didn't even try to hide the accusation in her tone. The Morrison case is complicated, I lied, the same lie Ryan had fed me. The earring burned in my pocket where I'd kept it all week, my own secret evidence. A wife should know her husband's schedule. Deborah's knife scraped against her plate. In my day, we made sure to keep track. Frank cleared his throat. Deb, let the girl eat. I'm not a girl, Frank. The words slipped out before I could stop them. And I'm quite aware of Ryan's schedule. Deborah's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. What exactly does that mean? I took a slow sip of wine, buying time. It means I respect my husband's career. Isn't that what you've always wanted? What I want, Deborah leaned forward, is for my son to have a proper home life. Children, perhaps? Instead of this modern arrangement. The word modern dripped with disdain. I set down my glass carefully, remembering Elena's words from our coffee meeting, don't let them bait you. You're playing chess, not checkers. Speaking of modern, I smiled sweetly, how's your online banking working out? Ryan mentioned setting it up for you. Deborah blinked, thrown by the change in topic. Oh, well. Yes. Though I prefer having Frank handle the finances. Really? Because I noticed Ryan's been helping with quite a few transfers lately. I watched her face carefully. Large ones. The color drained from Deborah's face. Frank suddenly became very interested in his pot roast. I don't know what you're implying, Deborah's voice wavered slightly. I'm not implying anything. Just making conversation about family finances. Isn't that what proper wives do? Frank's fork clattered against his plate. Brooke, perhaps we should. Perhaps we should discuss why Ryan's been moving money from his parents' accounts into a separate one. I pulled out my phone, sliding it across the table. Or why these transfers coincide with his late meetings. Deborah snatched up the phone, her hands shaking. These are private family matters. I am family. Or have you forgotten that in your rush to defend your perfect son? How dare you? How dare I what? Notice? Ask questions? Be more than just the trophy wife you wanted for Ryan? Frank stood abruptly. That's enough. You're right, Frank. It is enough. I stood too, gathering my purse. Thank you for dinner. Oh, and Deborah. You might want to check the Morrison case details. It ended 2 weeks ago. Ryan's been lying to all of us. I made it to my car before the tears started, but they weren't tears of sadness. For the first time in years, I felt something else, power. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena, did you do it? Phase 1 complete, I typed back. They know something's wrong, but not what. Yet. Another buzz, Ryan called. Looking for you. Of course he was. His mother would have reached him immediately, warning him that his carefully constructed world was starting to crack. I started the car, checking my rearview mirror. Deborah stood in the doorway, phone to her ear, gesturing frantically. Frank paced behind her, his military bearing forgotten in his agitation. My phone rang, Ryan's ringtone. I let it go to voicemail, imagining his face as he realized his mother knew about the money. He'd try to explain it away, of course. He was good at that. But the seeds of doubt were planted. The earring felt heavy in my pocket. Soon, very soon, it would make its appearance. But not yet. First, let him squirm, let him wonder what else I knew. I pulled away from the house, leaving chaos in my wake. Ryan had taught me well, in law, timing is everything. And my timing was about to become perfect. Ryan's laptop screen glowed in the darkness of his home office, illuminating secrets he thought were buried in encrypted files. Amazing what a spouse's birthday as a password can unlock. My hands trembled as I scrolled through email after email, each one worse than the last. Sarah, meet me at the usual place. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Miss you already. The messages stretched back months. Years. My marriage unraveling in time-stamped betrayals. A notification popped up, a new email from his bank. Another transfer, larger than the others. I clicked, then froze. The recipient's name matched the signature on those loving emails. Sarah Morrison. Not just his client's wife. His client's soon-to-be ex-wife. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. The Morrison divorce case. The one he'd wrapped up last week. The late meetings. The money from his parents. It all connected like a prosecutor's evidence board. My phone buzzed. Elena, you okay? It's 3 a.m. Before I could respond, headlights swept across the office window. Ryan's car, turning into the driveway. Early. Too early. I quickly closed the laptop, but not before forwarding key emails to my secure account. The stairs creaked under my feet as I hurried to our bedroom, heart pounding. The front door opened. Brooke? His voice carried up the stairs, tight with tension. We need to talk. I sat at my vanity, deliberately casual, when he appeared in the doorway. About what? My mother called. He loosened his tie, watching me in the mirror. Said you were asking questions about family finances. Worried about what I might find? His reflection smiled, but his eyes remained cold. There's nothing to find, sweetheart. Just some investments I'm handling for them. I opened my jewelry box, pulled out the pearl earring. Like this investment? The color drained from his face. Where did you? Your pillow. Last week. I set it on the vanity. Sarah has good taste. Tiffany's, right? Must have cost a fortune. Or did you use your parents' money for that too? It's not what you think. He stepped closer, reaching for my shoulder. I jerked away. Really? Because I think you're sleeping with your client's wife while stealing from your parents to fund your affair. I turned to face him. How am I doing so far? His facade cracked. Keep your voice down. Why? Afraid the neighbors might hear? Or afraid I might tell your mother exactly where her retirement fund went? You're being hysterical. His lawyer voice now, smooth and reasonable. Let me explain. Explain what? The hotel receipts. The secret account? Or should we discuss the Morrison case that conveniently made Sarah a very wealthy divorcee? He grabbed my arm, fingers digging in. You had no right to go through my things. Like you had no right to go through our marriage vows. I yanked free. Let me guess, Sarah's more understanding. More compliant. Everything your mother always wanted for you. Stop it. His voice cracked. Just stop. Why? Getting uncomfortable. Imagine how your father will feel when he learns his military pension is funding your midlife crisis. His hand shot out, knocking the jewelry box off the vanity. It crashed to the floor, scattering memories across the carpet. We both stared at the mess, breathing hard. You've changed, he whispered. No. I stepped over the scattered jewelry. I've just stopped pretending. Like you should have years ago. I grabbed my overnight bag, packed days ago, waiting for this moment. Ryan blocked the doorway. Where are you going? Away from you. Unless you'd like to explain to your parents why their daughter-in-law left in the middle of the night. He moved aside, defeated for now. But I knew better than to think it was over. We're not done, he called after me. Oh, we're just getting started. I paused at the top of the stairs. By the way, Sarah's other earring? Check your car's glove compartment. Wouldn't want her missing a matched set. I left him standing there, surrounded by the wreckage of his perfect life. In my purse, my phone buzzed with another bank notification. Another transfer from Ryan's account, this time, to my private one. Let him explain that to Sarah over their next late-night meeting. Elena's guest room felt like a confessional at 3 in the morning. I sat cross-legged on the bed, surrounded by printouts of bank statements and email threads, each page another nail in my marriage's coffin. You need to eat something, Elena appeared with coffee and toast. Revenge requires sustenance. I'm not sure it's revenge anymore. I pushed aside a stack of papers. It feels more like survival. My phone lit up, another message from Ryan. The 20th since I'd left. Each one increasingly desperate, come home. We can fix this. Don't do anything rash. Elena picked up one of the bank statements. Holy shit. Is this amount real? That's just what he took from his parents. I handed her another paper. This is what he's been moving to Sarah's accounts. The client's wife. Elena whistled. That's not just an affair. That's fraud. I finished her sentence. He's been manipulating the Morrison divorce settlement, hiding assets, creating fake expenses. The works. Have you told his parents? Not everything. I sipped the coffee, letting its warmth chase away the chill of certainty. Deborah called earlier. She's worried about Ryan's state of mind. Apparently, he's been acting erratic at work. Good. Elena's voice was hard. Let him squirm. My phone buzzed again. Not Ryan this time, Frank Davis. Brooke, we need to talk. Just us. Please. Elena read the message over my shoulder. It's a trap. Maybe. I stood up, pacing the room. But Frank's different from Deborah. He knows something's wrong with their accounts. He's been a military officer, he understands chain of command, following rules. And breaking them. Elena grabbed my arm. What if Ryan sent him? Then I'll have confirmation that they're all in it together. I started gathering the papers. Either way, I need to know. At least meet him somewhere public. I nodded, typing a response, the coffee shop on Main. 1 hour. Frank was already there when I arrived, sitting ramrod straight in his military posture. No coffee in front of him, just a manila envelope. Thank you for coming. He gestured to the chair across from him. I know this isn't easy. Nothing about this is easy, Frank. He slid the envelope across the table. I found these in Ryan's old room at our house. He's been retrieving things from our files. Inside were more bank statements, investment records, power of attorney documents. All with Ryan's signature. All dated months before the Morrison case began. He planned this, I whispered. All of it. There's more. Frank's voice cracked slightly. Sarah Morrison isn't just his client's wife. She's his college girlfriend. They reconnected when her husband hired him. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Does Deborah know? She suspects. But she'll never admit it. Frank straightened his shoulders. I'm not here to defend him, Brooke. I'm here to warn you. Ryan's always been strategic. Even as a child. He doesn't lose well. What are you saying? I'm saying be careful. He's already trying to access your old accounts, your previous job records. He's building a case. Against me? I almost laughed. I'm not the one committing fraud. No, but you're the one who can expose it. Frank stood up. Whatever you're planning, do it fast. And Brooke? He paused. I'm sorry. For all of it. I watched him leave, the envelope heavy in my hands. My phone buzzed, Elena checking in. But another message caught my eye. An email notification. Account access alert, login attempt from unknown device. Then another, password reset requested. And another, security questions changed. Ryan wasn't just building a case. He was trying to erase me. I pulled out my phone, dialing Elena's number. Remember that lawyer friend of yours? The one who specializes in financial crimes? Lucas? Yeah, why? Tell him I need to meet. Today. I gathered my things, already moving. And Elena? Tell him to bring everything he has on the Morrison case. All of it. The game was changing. Ryan wanted to play dirty. Fine. But he'd forgotten one thing, I had nothing left to lose. And everything to prove. Lucas Reed's office felt like neutral territory, though the stack of Morrison case files between us was anything but neutral. He studied the documents I'd brought, his expression growing darker with each page. "This isn't just fraud," he said finally. "This is a calculated scheme spanning years. Ryan's been planning this since before he even took the Morrison case. Can we prove it? We can do better." He pulled out a USB drive. "Remember that ethics investigation at Ryan's firm last year? The one that mysteriously went away?" He plugged it in, turning his monitor toward me. "It never really went away." The screen filled with more documents, internal memos, complaint files, settlement agreements. All carefully buried, all involving Ryan. Sarah Morrison wasn't his first affair with a client, Lucas continued. Just his most ambitious. My phone buzzed. Ryan again. This time with a different tone. "I know you're meeting with Lucas Reed. Think carefully about your next move. He's watching me." I showed Lucas the message. "Good." Lucas smiled grimly. "Let him watch. It'll make this next part more interesting." He outlined the plan, each step more audacious than the last. By the time he finished, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from possibility. "It's risky," he warned. "If we're wrong about any of this." "We're not." I stood up, gathering the files. "But I need to do something first." Elena was waiting outside in her car. "Well? Drive me home." "Are you insane? Ryan won't be there. It's Thursday. Board meeting until 7. I checked my watch. We have 2 hours. The house looked exactly as I'd left it, except for one detail, my jewelry box, now carefully restored to the vanity, every piece in place. Including both pearl earrings. "He's trying to gaslight you," Elena said, watching me examine them. "Make you doubt what you saw." "No." I picked up the earrings. "He's trying to prove he can fix anything. Control anything." I dropped them into my pocket. "Including me." We worked quickly, gathering what I needed, documents from Ryan's home office, backup drives, old photos. Evidence of the life he'd carefully constructed and was now desperately trying to preserve. A car door slammed outside. "Shit," Elena hissed. "He's early." "Go." I pushed her toward the back door. "Take everything. I'll handle this. Brooke. Trust me." Ryan found me sitting at his desk, calm as Sunday dinner. "You're home. Temporarily." I smiled, the way he'd taught me, pleasant, unrevealing. "Just getting some things in order." "By breaking into my office?" He moved closer, trying to intimidate. "Going through my files. Meeting with Lucas Reed." "You taught me well, Ryan. Document everything. Trust no one. Remember? Whatever you think you know. I know enough." I stood, matching his stance. "About Sarah. About the other women. About your parents' money. The question is, what do you want everyone else to know?" His mask slipped, just for a moment. "Are you threatening me?" "No, darling. I'm negotiating." I pulled out the pearl earrings, set them on his desk. "You have until Sunday dinner to tell your parents everything. Or I will. They'll never believe you. Maybe not. But the ethics board will. And so will the police." I moved past him, pausing at the door. "Oh, and Ryan? I'm keeping my house key. For now." "Why are you doing this?" His voice cracked. "We could fix this. Because you didn't just betray me, Ryan. You tried to erase me." I turned back one last time. "Now I'm returning the favor." Elena was waiting around the corner, engine running. As we pulled away, I saw Ryan through the office window, standing exactly where I'd left him, holding those damned earrings. "You okay?" Elena asked. I checked my phone, one new message from Lucas, everything's in place. Ready when you are. I'm perfect, I replied, to both of them. Sunday dinner's going to be interesting. The pearls in my pocket felt lighter now. No longer evidence of betrayal, but ammunition for what was coming. Ryan wanted to play chess. Fine. But he'd forgotten who taught him how to lose. Sunday dinner arrived with storm clouds and the weight of inevitability. I walked into the Davis family home for what I knew would be the last time. Carrying a folder that felt heavier than all my years of marriage combined. Deborah's perfect table setting screamed of denial, her best china, crystal glasses. Everything arranged as if normalcy could be forced through proper placement. Brooke. Ryan stood as I entered, his lawyer's smile firmly in place. We weren't sure you'd come. And miss family dinner? I took my usual seat, noting how Frank's hands trembled slightly on his water glass. Wouldn't dream of it. Well, Deborah bustled in with her pot roast, isn't this nice? All of us together again. The silence that followed felt like a noose tightening. Ryan watched me, waiting. He thought he knew what was coming. He'd prepared for it, probably had counter-arguments ready for every accusation. Sarah sends her regards, I said quietly, cutting into my meat. Ryan's fork clattered against his plate. Deborah froze mid-pour. I ran into her yesterday, I continued. At the bank, actually. She was quite surprised to see me there. Almost as surprised as when I showed her the transfer records. Brooke, Ryan started. Did you know, I turned to Frank, that Sarah Morrison was Ryan's college girlfriend? Before he married me. Such a romantic reunion story. Though I suppose her husband didn't think so. That's enough. Ryan's voice cracked like a whip. No, it's not. I pulled out my folder. Would you like to tell them about the money, Ryan? Or should I? What money? Deborah's voice was barely a whisper. I slid documents across the table, bank statements, transfer records, emails. Your retirement fund, Deborah. The one Ryan's been managing. Did you check the balance lately? Frank picked up a statement, his military posture crumbling as he read. Son. It's not what it looks like, Ryan stood, desperate now. I can explain everything. Like you explained the ethics investigation. I kept my voice steady. Or the other client affairs. Or how about? The slap caught me off guard, Deborah's hand connecting with my cheek with surprising force. How dare you? In my house. Mother, Ryan reached for her, but she shrugged him off. No. I won't listen to these lies. These accusations against my son are true. Frank's voice cut through her hysteria. He held up another document. The signatures. The dates. It's all here. Frank, please. How much? Frank's question fell like a hammer. How much did you take? Ryan's facade cracked. I can fix this. I just need time. Time for what? I stood slowly. To hide more money. To destroy more evidence. To erase more people who get in your way. I never. You tried to erase me, Ryan. My accounts, my history, my identity, all mysteriously compromised this week. But you forgot something. I pulled out my phone, showed them the screen. Lucas Reed sends his regards. And so does the ethics board. The room tilted sideways as Ryan lunged, not at me, but at the folder. Papers scattered like confetti, Deborah screamed, Frank's water glass shattered on the floor. When the chaos settled, Ryan held a single sheet of paper, his hands shaking. The divorce papers. Already signed. It's over, I said quietly. The board has everything. The police have everything. Sarah Morrison has everything. You bitch. Deborah's voice trembled. You've destroyed this family. No, Deborah. Your son did that. I gathered my purse, stepping carefully around the broken glass. Check your accounts. All of them. Then decide who really betrayed this family. I made it to my car before my hands started shaking. My phone buzzed. Elena, done? Through the dining room window, I could see them, Frank holding the documents, Deborah crying. Ryan standing alone in the wreckage of his perfect life. Almost, I typed back. One more thing to do. I pulled out the pearl earrings, my final piece of evidence, my last act of revenge. Tomorrow they'd be on Sarah Morrison's doorstep, along with copies of everything. Let her explain that to her divorce lawyer. Sometimes karma needs a little help. The law firm's parking garage felt like neutral ground at midnight. Ryan stood between two cars, his perfect suit wrinkled, his lawyer's mask finally cracking. Behind him, Sarah Morrison emerged from the shadows, clutching her designer purse like a shield. You wanted to talk, I said. So talk. This is insane, Brooke. Ryan stepped forward. We can still fix this. All of it. Fix what exactly? I glanced at Sarah. The fraud? The affairs? Or just your reputation? Sarah's perfectly manicured hand trembled. Ryan said you were being unreasonable. Unreasonable? I pulled out my phone, clicked play. Ryan's voice filled the garage, discussing money transfers, fake accounts, plans made years ago. Is that what you call this? Where did you get that? Ryan's voice cracked. Your office. The night I left. Amazing what people say when they think they're alone. I paused the recording. Want to hear the rest? The part about Sarah's husband? Sarah's face went white. What about my husband? Don't, Ryan warned. Why not? Afraid she'll learn how you orchestrated her entire divorce. How you manipulated the settlement to hide money for both of you. That's not, Sarah started. True. I laughed. Check your new offshore account. The one Ryan set up last month. Funny how the amounts match what disappeared from his parents' retirement fund. Ryan lunged for my phone. I stepped back, letting him stumble. Careful. Lucas Reed has copies of everything. One wrong move and it all goes public. You're bluffing. Am I? I nodded toward the garage entrance. Right on cue, Frank's military straight figure appeared, followed by two men in suits. Hello, son. Frank's voice echoed. These gentlemen from the ethics board would like a word. Ryan's face contorted. You brought my father into this? No, Ryan. You did that yourself. I turned to Sarah. They'll want to talk to you too. About the Morrison settlement, the hidden accounts, everything. Sarah's designer bag hit the floor. You promised this wouldn't happen, she hissed at Ryan. You said you had it under control. I did. I do. Ryan reached for her, but she recoiled. Baby, please. Don't baby me. She backed away. My divorce settlement? My accounts? What did you do? What he always does, I answered. Uses people, then erases them when they're no longer useful. The ethics board investigators moved closer. Ryan's eyes darted between them, his father, Sarah, me, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Brooke, his voice softened, desperate now. Everything I did for us. For our future. No. I stepped closer, close enough to smell his expensive cologne one last time. Everything you did for yourself. And now you get to experience what it feels like to be erased. I pulled out the pearl earrings, his last gift to Sarah, and dropped them at his feet. Your mother wanted me to return these. Apparently, they're family heirlooms. From your grandmother. Sarah's gasp was audible. Ryan's face crumpled. Miss Morrison. One investigator stepped forward. We'll need you to come with us. Wait, Sarah grabbed her bag. I can explain. Save it for the deposition. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Ryan? The divorce papers are already filed. Your signature's been notarized. Funny how cooperative people get when shown the right evidence. Frank moved to his son's side as the investigators closed in. I'm sorry, son. But this ends now. I walked away to the sound of rights being read, Sarah's heels clicking as she fled, and Ryan's world collapsing behind me. Elena waited in her car at the garage entrance. You okay? She asked as I slid into the passenger seat. I watched in the rearview mirror as Ryan was led away, his perfect suit rumpled, his careful plans in ruins. The man who tried to erase me was finally facing erasure himself. I'm free, I said, and for the first time in years, it felt like truth. The courthouse steps felt different this time, no longer intimidating, just stone and concrete beneath my feet. I adjusted my marketing director nameplate, still new enough to make me smile. Elena's company had welcomed me back like I'd never left. Brooke. I turned to find Ryan standing there, his expensive suit replaced by something off the rack. The ethics board investigation had stripped away more than just his law license. The restitution hearing's over, I said. You didn't need to wait. I know. He shifted, uncomfortable in his new skin. I saw Frank there. He wouldn't look at me. Can you blame him? No. He ran a hand through his graying hair. Mother's still not speaking to anyone. The shame, she says. Deborah always did care more about appearances than truth. Like father, like son. His attempt at a smile failed. You look good. Happy. I am. I checked my watch, lunch with Lucas in 20 minutes. Was there something you needed? I wanted to tell you. He pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box. I found these while packing up the house. Inside lay a pair of simple pearl studs, my first anniversary gift, before the grand gestures and manipulations began. Keep them, I said. They were always yours. The real ones, I mean. He closed the box. Everything else, the other jewelry, the gifts, the life we built, that was all fake. My fake. But these? He set the box on the step between us. These were true. Truth's not really your strong suit, Ryan. I know. But I'm learning. Therapy's helping. He straightened his drugstore tie. I never wanted to erase you, Brooke. I wanted to keep you. I just didn't know how to do that without controlling everything. And now I'm learning how to exist without controlling anything. He glanced at his watch, the Rolex replaced by something practical. Your boyfriend's waiting, isn't he? Lucas. How did you? Small town. People talk. He shrugged. He's a good lawyer. Ethical. Everything I pretended to be. A car horn honked, Elena, right on schedule. Beyond her, I could see Lucas waiting at our usual cafe table, patient and uncomplicated. Goodbye, Ryan. Goodbye, Brooke. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for who I was. I watched him descend the steps, shoulders squared against the weight of consequences. The velvet box sat between us like a full stop at the end of a very long sentence. I picked it up, feeling its lightness. Inside, the pearl studs caught the sunlight, simple, unadorned, honest in their modesty. Everything our marriage hadn't been. Elena's horn honked again. Through the cafe window, Lucas raised his coffee cup in greeting, no expectations in his smile. I slipped the box into my purse, not quite keeping it, not quite letting go. Some stories don't end with neat conclusions. Sometimes the truest endings are the ones that leave room for questions. The courthouse doors opened behind me, releasing another wave of people into the afternoon sun. Among them, Frank Davis walked alone, his military posture softened by time and disappointment. He nodded as he passed, a gesture somewhere between acknowledgement and approval. We'd both learned the same lesson: sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who teach us how to be stronger by breaking us. I descended the steps, leaving behind the echoes of accusations and revelations. Ahead, Lucas stood to greet me, his smile offering not a fairy tale ending, but something better, a beginning without pretense. The pearl studs pressed against my side, a small weight to remind me that even in revenge, even in justice, there are pieces of truth worth keeping. Not as trophies, but as lessons in what to value and what to leave behind. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in destroying your opponent, but in walking away with your own truth intact.
The scent hit me first. Unfamiliar perfume lingering in my living room like an uninvited guest. Sweet, cloying, definitely not mine. I stood frozen in the doorway, keys still dangling from my fingers as my eyes traced the evidence scattered across our cream-colored couch. A wine glass with a perfect crimson lip print. A silk scarf in deep purple, carelessly draped over the armrest. The half-empty bottle of Cabernet that Travis and I had been saving for our anniversary. I'm Skylar, and this is the moment my carefully constructed life began to crack. My hands didn't shake as I set down my purse and took out my phone. Click. 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 3 perfect photos of someone else's presence in my home. The timestamps would matter later, I knew that much. 4 years of marriage had taught me to document everything, even if I didn't yet understand why. Mommy. Mason's voice echoed from the hallway where Mrs. Peterson, our elderly neighbor, held his small hand. We made cookies. I forced my face into something resembling normalcy. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I scooped him up, breathing in the simple comfort of his baby shampoo and sugar-sweet breath. Thank you for watching him, Mrs. Peterson. I really appreciate you picking him up when the daycare called. Anytime, dear. Though Travis should have answered his phone. I tried him 3 times before calling you. Of course he didn't answer. He was too busy entertaining his guest. After Mrs. Peterson left, I settled Mason with his toys in his room and returned to the living room. My fingers traced the lip print on the glass, and I wondered if she'd worn the same shade when she kissed my husband. The thought made my stomach turn. My phone buzzed. Travis. Hey, babe. Running late at the office? Don't wait up. The lie settled in my chest like ice. I typed back, no problem. Hope the meeting goes well. I didn't mention finding his little souvenir collection. Didn't tell him I'd come home early because Mason had a fever. Didn't say I knew exactly what kind of meeting kept him busy. Instead, I walked to our bedroom and opened his closet. The evidence was there too. A receipt from La Maison tucked into his jacket pocket, dated last Tuesday when he'd claimed to be at a client dinner. $200 for wine and dessert. Romantic. My phone buzzed again. Sarah this time. How's Mason feeling? Better. Listen, can you come over tomorrow? I need your help with something. Of course. Everything okay? I stared at the purple scarf, its silk catching the late afternoon light. No, but it will be. Mason's voice called from his room. Mommy, can we have mac and cheese? Coming, baby. I called back, then quickly typed to Sarah. I'll explain tomorrow. Bring your laptop and that real estate contact of yours. I tucked the scarf into my drawer and washed the wine glass, erasing the physical evidence but keeping the photos safe in my phone. Travis wanted to play games? Fine. But he'd forgotten something crucial about me. I learned strategy at my father's knee, watching him build his real estate empire from nothing. And I'd inherited more than just his eyes. That night, as I tucked Mason into bed, he asked, Is Daddy coming home to read my story? Not tonight, sweetie. I kissed his forehead, still slightly warm. But don't worry, Mommy's going to make sure everything's okay. I sat in the darkness of his room long after he fell asleep, planning my next moves like pieces on a chessboard. Travis thought he was being clever, but he'd made a fatal mistake. He'd underestimated me.
And by the time I was done, he'd learn exactly what that meant. The game was just beginning, and I intended to win. The key clicked in the lock of my parents' Victorian home. My home now, though I still couldn't think of it that way. 2 years after their accident, their presence lingered in every corner. Dad's reading glasses on his desk, Mom's gardening magazine collection still arranged by season. I'd barely touched anything since the funeral. Sarah's heels clicked against the hardwood floors behind me. "You're sure about this?" "Travis wants to sell it." My voice came out harder than I intended. "He's been pushing harder lately. Says we could use the money for investments." Bastard. Sarah moved past me into the study, her laptop tucked under her arm. "Your parents left this house to you specifically, not to both of you. He can't force a sale." I traced my fingers along the mahogany desk where Dad had taught me about property values and market trends. "He's found a way. I saw the paperwork he tried to hide. He's already talking to developers." Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard. "I've pulled up the deed records. There's something weird here, Sky. The ownership status changed last month." My stomach dropped. "What?" "It shows a transfer of partial interest to..." She squinted at the screen. "Evelyn Blackwood? Through some kind of holding company." The name meant nothing to me, but the timing, right when Travis started staying late at the office, that meant everything. My phone buzzed. Travis. I ignored it. "Look at this." Sarah turned her laptop around. "Evelyn Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Development. They specialize in historic property renovation." Her air quotes dripped with skepticism. A woman's face stared back at me from the company website. Elegant, mid-40s with a shark smile. Something about her eyes reminded me of that purple scarf. "She's connected to him somehow," I said. "The affair, the sudden interest in selling, it's all linked." "Sky..." Sarah hesitated. "There's more. Your brother Lucas called me yesterday. He's worried about some investments Travis convinced him to make." The betrayal twisted deeper. "What investments?" "Some kind of property development fund. Lucas said Travis promised guaranteed returns, but he's having trouble getting straight answers about where the money went." My phone buzzed again. This time a text. "Where are you? We need to talk about the house." I typed back, "Busy with Mason." Another lie in our growing collection. Sarah watched me, concern etched on her face. "What are you thinking?" I walked to the window, looking out at Mom's rose garden. The bushes were overgrown now, but still blooming, stubborn like she'd been. "I'm thinking it's time to do what Dad taught me. Follow the money. And Mason is exactly why I can't let Travis destroy everything my parents built." I turned back to her. "Can your real estate contact help us trace these property transfers?" Already texting him. Sarah's phone chimed. "He can meet tomorrow, but Sky, if Travis is involved in something shady, then I need proof." I pulled out my own phone and scrolled through recent photos. The wine glass, the scarf, the receipt. And I need to know who this Evelyn Blackwood really is. A car door slammed outside. Through the window, I watched Travis stride up the walkway, his face set in lines of frustration I'd grown too familiar with lately. "Back door," I whispered to Sarah. "Take the laptop. I'll handle him." She squeezed my arm as she slipped out. "Be careful." I stood in the study, surrounded by my parents' memories, and waited for the front door to open. Travis thought he was playing a clever game, but he'd forgotten something crucial. This house wasn't just property to me. It was my heritage, my son's future, and the last piece of my parents I had left. The door opened. Travis's footsteps echoed through the hall. "Skylar?" His voice carried a note of warning. "We need to talk about some papers I need you to sign." I touched Dad's old fountain pen, still sitting in its holder. "Yes," I called back. "I think we do." Game on. Travis stood in my parents' study, his suit jacket draped over Dad's chair like he owned it. The sight made my fingers curl into fists. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," he said, sliding papers across the mahogany desk. "But since you're here, we might as well discuss the offer." I didn't touch the documents. Which offer? The one to sell my family's home or the one you made to my brother? His pause was barely perceptible, but I caught it. Lucas told you? He's not the only one who's been asking questions. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the photo of the wine glass. Like, who's been helping you make these investment decisions? The color drained from his face when he saw the image. Sky. Is it Evelyn Blackwood? The name hit him like a physical blow. Or maybe I should ask her protege. Chloe, isn't it? A woman's laugh drifted through the open window. Rich, confident, closer than it should be. Travis's eyes darted toward the sound. You brought her here? My voice came out whisper quiet. Dangerous. The front door opened. High heels clicked on hardwood. Travis? The car's waiting. Oh. She was younger than I expected. Sleek blonde hair, expensive dress, wearing the same shade of lipstick that had stained my wine glass. Behind her stood an older woman, Evelyn Blackwood herself, looking exactly like her website photo. Mrs. Henderson. Evelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes. We were hoping to discuss this professionally, like how you professionally helped my husband steal my brother's savings. Travis stepped forward. Nobody stole anything. It's a legitimate investment opportunity. The returns are a lie. I pulled up the property records Sarah had found. Just like the paperwork you forged to transfer partial ownership of this house. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? You don't understand business, he snapped. This house is just sitting here, a waste of valuable property. Evelyn's company can what? Turn my parents' home into condos? Use it to scam more people like Lucas? Chloe laughed, the sound grating. God, you're so provincial. This is why he needed someone who understands ambition. My phone buzzed. Sarah's text. Police contact confirmed fraud reports against Blackwood Dev. Evidence incoming. Ambition? I smiled, feeling the weight of Dad's fountain pen in my hand. Let me show you what ambition looks like. I pressed play on the recording app that had been running since I entered the house. Travis's confession about Lucas's investment played clearly through the speaker. Evelyn's composed mask cracked. Turn that off. Why? Worried about what comes next? The part where you discuss the forged documents or the other investors you've defrauded? You're bluffing, Travis said, but his voice shook. Am I? Ask your father, Travis. He's been helping me gather evidence for weeks. Turns out he's not thrilled about his son becoming a con artist. Chloe grabbed her purse. We're leaving. Now. No. I blocked the doorway. You're staying right here until the detective Sarah called finishes reviewing those fraud reports. He seemed very interested in Blackwood Development's history. Evelyn's face hardened. You stupid girl. You have no idea what you're doing. Actually, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm protecting what's mine. I met Travis's eyes. All of it. The house, Mason's future, my brother's investment. Everything you tried to steal. Blue lights flashed outside the window. Travis lunged for the papers on the desk, but I was faster. Years of watching my father build his business legally, ethically, had taught me more than Travis ever understood. It's over, I said as footsteps approached the front door. And Travis? I want a divorce. The look of defeat on his face should have felt like victory. Instead, I felt only a cold certainty that I'd done what needed to be done. For Mason, for my parents' legacy, for myself. As the detective entered, I thought of Mason, safe at Sarah's house, unaware that his world was changing. I'd tell him tomorrow, help him understand as best I could. But for now, I watched Travis's carefully constructed scheme crumble and felt the weight of my parents' absence lift just a little. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes it's about protection. And I'd protected what mattered most. Mason's dinosaur backpack looked too small against the pile of hastily packed suitcases. He clutched his favorite T-Rex, watching me with eyes too serious for a 4-year-old. Are we going on vacation, Mommy? The bruise on my wrist, hidden beneath my sleeve where Travis had grabbed me during our confrontation, throbbed with my pulse. Something like that, baby. We're going to stay with Aunt Sarah for a while. My phone lit up with another message from Travis's father, Henry. He's threatening legal action. Says he has proof you knew about the investments. Be careful. The doorbell rang. Sarah stood there, car keys in hand, face grim. Henry called. You need to see this. She handed me a manila envelope. Inside were photos, me at the family home, meeting with Sarah's real estate contact, screenshots of emails I'd never written authorizing property transfers, all expertly forged. Evelyn's good, Sarah said quietly. She's setting you up to take the fall if the investment scheme goes south. Mason tugged at my sleeve. Can I bring my blocks? Of course, sweetheart. I forced a smile. Go pick your favorites. As soon as he was out of earshot, I turned to Sarah. How bad? Lucas called. The FBI is investigating Blackwood development. If these forged documents surface... She didn't need to finish. My phone buzzed again. Travis, come home. We can fix this. Think about Mason. The threat beneath the concern was clear. I deleted the message. A car pulled into our driveway, Henry's Mercedes. Travis's father stepped out, looking older than his 60 years. Skylar. He held up a USB drive. You need to see what I found in Travis's home office. We gathered around Sarah's laptop. Spreadsheets, emails, bank transfers, a web of fraud with my forged signature woven throughout. But there was something else. Wait, I said. Go back to that email. It was from my parents' old email account, dated 2 months after their accident, an account that should have been closed. Someone's been using their identity, Henry said, to authorize transfers, validate documents. Travis and Evelyn didn't just forge your signature, they've been ghosting your parents. The violation hit deeper than the affair, then the theft. They'd stolen not just money and property, but my parents' memory itself. Mason's small voice came from the doorway. Daddy's here. Travis stood on our front lawn, Chloe waiting in her car at the curb. He looked up at the window, eyes meeting mine. Take Mason upstairs, I told Sarah. To Henry, I added, how much time do I have before those documents surface? 24 hours, maybe less. Evelyn's getting nervous. She'll move soon. I thought of my father's lessons about business, about protecting what matters, about how sometimes the best defense is making your opponent reveal their own weakness. Send everything to your FBI contact, I said. But first, I need you to make some calls. If they want to use my parents against me, let's show them exactly what the Henderson name still means in this town. Henry nodded, understanding darkening his features. Travis doesn't know I'm helping you. Keep it that way. I watched Travis pace the lawn, phone pressed to his ear. He made this about family. Now he'll learn what that really means. Sarah returned without Mason. He's playing in my old room. Sky, whatever you're planning. I'm not planning anything. I touched the bruise on my wrist. I'm finishing what they started, but this time we're playing by my rules. Travis's voice carried through the window. Just give me an hour. I can convince her. I picked up my phone and dialed Lucas's number. My brother answered on the first ring. You ready? I asked. Everything's in place, just like Dad taught us. I watched Travis below, still believing he held all the cards, still thinking he knew what I was capable of. His next move would be desperate, probably violent. But I'd learned from the best. My parents hadn't just left me a house. They'd left me their strength. And I intended to use it. Sarah's guest room felt like a war room. Laptops, documents, and coffee cups covered every surface. Mason slept down the hall, his dinosaur nightlight casting shadows while we planned our next move. The board meeting's tomorrow, Henry said, spreading out the shareholder documents. Evelyn's planning to present evidence that you've been embezzling funds through your parents' estate. I studied the forged paperwork. My mother's signature looked perfect. Too perfect. They've been planning this for months. Lucas's voice crackled through the speakerphone. The FBI agent says they need more time to build their case. If Evelyn presents those documents first, I'll be arrested, I finished. and Travis gets everything. The house, custody of Mason, control of the estate. Sarah's phone buzzed. Her face went pale. Sky. Evelyn just posted bail for Travis. My hand instinctively went to my bruised wrist. The restraining order hadn't even been processed yet. He's not alone, Sarah continued. Chloe's with him, and they're heading to your parents' house. The security camera feed from the Victorian showed them forcing open the back door. Travis knew about the spare key behind the loose brick. Of course he did. I'd trusted him with everything once. They're looking for something specific, Henry observed, watching Travis tear through Dad's study. Something they need before tomorrow's meeting. The realization hit like ice water. Dad's ledger, the real one. Lucas's sharp intake of breath crackled through the phone. The one with all his notes about the property deals? I thought that was lost in the accident. No. I grabbed my keys. Mom showed me where they hid it right before. She said I'd know when to use it. Skylar, wait. Henry caught my arm. If you go there now, they'll destroy everything my parents built. I pulled away. I won't let that happen. Sarah blocked the door. At least let me call the police. By the time they arrive, Travis will have what he wants. I met her eyes. You know what he's capable of now. The security feed showed Travis and Chloe methodically destroying the study. Books thrown, drawers emptied, pictures smashed. Each crash felt like a physical blow. Stay with Mason, I told Sarah. If I'm not back in an hour, don't. She hugged me fiercely. Just don't. The drive to my parents' house was a blur. Streetlights streaked past like accusations. What kind of mother leaves her child to confront her abuser? What kind of daughter lets thieves destroy her parents' legacy? My father's voice echoed in my memory. Sometimes protecting what matters means risking everything. Travis's car sat in the driveway, Chloe behind the wheel, engine running. Our eyes met through the windshield. She smiled, reaching for her phone. I slipped in through the garden entrance, my childhood route for sneaking out. The house creaked with familiar sounds, but now they felt like warnings. Travis's voice drifted down from upstairs. It has to be here somewhere. Evelyn says we need proof of the original deals. Maybe in the master bedroom? Chloe called back. Rich people love hidden safes. They didn't know. Mom and Dad never trusted safes. Too obvious, Dad always said. The best hiding place is one nobody thinks to question. I moved silently through the kitchen, past the shattered family photos, toward the one place they'd never look. Mom's garden shrine. A simple wooden cabinet filled with seed packets and tools. The false bottom had fooled even me, until she showed me the trick. The ledger waited there, wrapped in plastic, exactly as she'd left it. Inside were records of every legitimate deal, every proper transaction, and notes about which developers had tried to force sales through fraud, including Evelyn Blackwood, from 15 years ago. Footsteps creaked overhead. I clutched the ledger, heart pounding. I could slip out now, unnoticed. Safe. But Mom's favorite photo lay shattered on the floor. The three of us in her garden, laughing. They'd destroyed enough. I pulled out my phone and dialed Lucas. Tell Henry to call the board. Emergency meeting. Tonight. Sky, it's time they learned what happens when you threaten a Henderson. The stairs creaked. Travis was coming down. Game on. The boardroom lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps. 15 faces stared back at me. Old men in expensive suits who'd known my father, who'd attended his funeral, who now sat in judgment as Evelyn Blackwood presented her case. As you can see, Evelyn gestured to the projection screen, the transfer documents clearly show Mrs. Henderson's involvement in the fraudulent activities. My father's ledger felt heavy in my bag. One move could end this, but timing was everything. Travis sat beside Evelyn, not meeting my eyes. The bruise on my wrist had darkened to purple, visible now beneath my sleeve. I caught Henry's slight nod from across the room. Everything was ready. Furthermore, Evelyn continued, we have evidence of offshore accounts. The boardroom door burst open. FBI agents flooded in, badges raised. "Evelyn Blackwood," the lead agent announced. "We have a warrant for your arrest." The chaos that erupted was almost beautiful. Almost. Then Chloe screamed from the hallway, "He has your son." The world stopped. My phone lit up with Sarah's text. Travis broke in, took Mason. "I'm so sorry, police following." The ledger, the evidence, the arrests, none of it mattered anymore. I ran. Travis's car screeched out of the parking garage, Mason's terrified face pressed against the back window. My son's mouth formed one word. "Mommy." I jumped into Henry's Mercedes, keys already in hand. He'd planned for this, knowing his son better than I had. The engine roared to life. "Skylar, wait!" Lucas's voice crackled through my phone. "Police are in pursuit. Don't..." I ended the call. Traffic blurred past as I followed Travis's taillights. He was heading toward the harbor, toward Evelyn's private yacht. Their escape plan, now desperate and accelerated. Rain started falling, making the roads slick. Travis took a corner too fast, fishtailing. Mason's scream carried through the closed windows. "Pull over!" I shouted uselessly. "Think about your son." Travis's response was to accelerate. In the passenger seat, I caught glimpses of Chloe's panicked face. She hadn't signed up for this level of crazy. The harbor appeared through the rain. Travis's car skidded to a stop near the private docks. He yanked Mason from the back seat, carrying him toward the yacht where lights already blazed. I abandoned Henry's car, running across wet concrete. "Travis, please." He spun, Mason struggling in his arms. "Stay back. This is your fault, all of it. If you just signed the papers, Daddy, you're hurting me." Mason's voice cracked with fear. Something shifted in Travis's eyes, something dark and desperate. "I can't go to prison. I won't." "Then let Mason go." I took a step closer. "Let him come to me and you can take the boat. I won't stop you." Chloe grabbed Travis's arm. "She's right. This is insane. He's just a child." Travis shoved her away. She slipped on the wet dock, falling hard. In that moment of distraction, Mason bit his father's hand and broke free. Everything slowed down. Mason running toward me, Travis lunging after him. The dock's edge slick with rain. My son's feet sliding. I dove forward as Mason fell. My fingers caught his jacket, but momentum carried us both over the edge. Cold water shocked my system. Mason's weight dragged us down. In the murky darkness, I heard my mother's voice. "Protect what matters most." I kicked hard, pushing Mason toward the surface, using the last of my strength. Hands reached down. Lucas's hands. I realized dimly. He must have followed me. Mason broke the surface, safe in his uncle's grip. But as I tried to follow, something caught my leg. Tangled dock line, pulling me deeper. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was Travis's face peering down from the dock, finally showing something like remorse. Then nothing. The hospital lights were too bright when I opened my eyes. Lucas sat beside me, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Mason?" My voice cracked. "Safe. With Sarah." He leaned forward. "Travis is in custody. They caught him trying to board the yacht." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by rage. "And Evelyn?" "That's why I need you to focus." Lucas showed me his phone. The FBI found something in her files about Mom and Dad's accident. The world tilted sideways. 2 years of grief suddenly felt like an open wound. It wasn't an accident. The words tasted like poison. Was it? Brake lines. Evelyn's company wanted their property holdings. When they wouldn't sell, he didn't need to finish. A nurse entered, checking my vitals. "You have another visitor. Police detective." The detective was older, weathered, with kind eyes that had seen too much. "Mrs. Henderson, we need your statement about the dock incident. But first, there's something you should know. Your husband's talking." Travis's confession played on a tablet. His voice shook as he detailed everything. The fraud, the affair, how Evelyn had orchestrated it all. How she'd promised him wealth beyond imagination if he helped pressure me into selling. She said it would be easy. Travis's recorded voice cracked. Like the Henderson accident. Just make it look natural. The detective paused the video. We're offering him a deal in exchange for testimony against Blackwood Development, but we need your cooperation. I thought of Mason's terror on that dock, of my parents trapped in their car, of everything that had been stolen from us. When? The DA's waiting. Now. Lucas helped me into a wheelchair. My body ached from the near drowning, but something burned hotter than pain. Purpose. The conference room was small. Travis sat handcuffed to the table, Evelyn beside him with her lawyer. She still wore her boardroom smile, but it cracked when she saw me. Skylar, Travis started. I never meant... Save it. I pulled out my father's ledger. You wanted this so badly? Read it. The lawyer reached for it, but I opened it myself. Page 47, Dad. The day Evelyn first tried to force a sale. He documented everything. Evelyn's smile vanished completely. That proves nothing. Maybe not alone, but combined with the brake line evidence, the fraud paper trail, the attempted kidnapping. I leaned forward. You really should have researched the Henderson family better. Dad taught us to keep records of everything. You can't prove I had anything to do with your parents. Her voice held a tremor now. No? I turned to Travis. Tell her what you told the FBI about her instructions, about making things look natural. Travis wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. I'm sorry, Evelyn. I had to protect myself. You weak little. She lunged across the table. The detective moved fast, restraining her. As they led her away, she screamed threats, promises of revenge, but all I could see was the fear in her eyes. The same fear my parents must have felt. The DA has everything he needs, the detective said. It's over. But it wasn't. Not quite. I wheeled closer to Travis. Mason asked about you yesterday. Wanted to know if bad daddies can become good daddies again. His shoulders shook. What did you tell him? The truth. That people make choices. And those choices have consequences. I placed the ledger on the table. You have a choice now. Help make this right, or let Evelyn drag you down with her. Why are you giving me this chance? Not for you. I thought of Mason's smile, so like my father's. For our son. Because he deserves to know that even when people fail us, justice doesn't have to mean destruction. I left Travis there, staring at the ledger that contained both his downfall and his potential redemption. Lucas wheeled me out into the sunshine, where Sarah waited with Mason. My son ran to me, careful of my injuries. Mommy, are the bad people gone? I held him close, breathing in his innocent trust. Yes, baby. And they can't hurt us anymore. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about protecting what matters most, even if that means showing mercy when you least want to. Dad would have understood that. The Victorian's front porch creaked under my feet as I fitted the key into the lock. Mason darted past me, his dinosaur backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Can I have my old room back? Of course, baby. I watched him race upstairs, his footsteps echoing through halls that finally felt alive again. Sarah helped me carry in the last box, marked simply, Mom's Things. We'd found it hidden in the attic during the final walkthrough of my old house with Travis. Henry called, she said, setting the box down. Travis's sentencing is tomorrow. I nodded, running my fingers along the box's dusty edges. Lucas is handling it. I need to be here. You sure? Through the window, I watched Mason in the backyard, carefully watering Mom's roses just like she'd taught him. Some had survived the neglect, stubbornly blooming despite everything. This is where we need to be. Sarah squeezed my hand and left me alone with the box. Inside, beneath old photos and keepsakes, I found an envelope with my name in Mom's handwriting. The paper was aged, like she'd written it years ago. My dearest Skylar, if you're reading this, you've already faced what I always feared. Someone trying to take what we built. Your father and I knew Evelyn wouldn't stop. We've left you everything you need to protect our legacy, but the real strength was always in you. Remember? Revenge is easy, but justice takes courage. Choose wisely. Love, Mom. My phone buzzed. A text from Travis. The DA offered 5 years. I'm taking it. Tell Mason I'm sorry. I deleted the message without responding. Some apologies couldn't be sent by text. The doorbell rang. Henry stood there, looking older but somehow lighter. The board approved your proposal. The Henderson Foundation for Ethics and Business Development is officially funded. Dad would have loved the irony. I invited him in, using Evelyn's seized assets to fund oversight and whistleblower protection. Travis asked me to give you this. He handed me an envelope. Said it was important. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Travis's signed confession about my parents' accident, more detailed than what he'd given the police. Evidence that would ensure Evelyn never saw freedom again. Grandpa Henry. Mason's voice carried from the garden. Look at my flowers. Henry's eyes misted. May I? I nodded, watching him join Mason by the roses. They looked right together, proof that some bonds transcended the sins of others. In my father's study, everything was finally back in place. His glasses on the desk, Mom's magazines arranged by season, the ledger returned to its rightful spot. But something felt different. Lighter, clearer, like morning after a storm. I opened the wall safe behind his desk calendar, where he'd always kept important documents. Inside was one final surprise. Adoption papers dated just weeks before their death. They'd been planning to adopt Lucas permanently, making official what love had already decided. My brother's footsteps in the doorway told me he'd known. Found them last week, he said quietly. Dad told me the night before the accident. They were going to tell you at Sunday dinner. I hugged him, feeling the weight of everything we'd lost and found in these past weeks. Sky? Mason called from the garden. Can we plant new flowers? Through the window, I watched my son kneeling in the dirt, Henry showing him how to prepare the soil, just like Mom had shown me. Behind them, the roses bloomed fierce and bright, survivors all. Coming, baby. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying what hurt you. Sometimes it's about building something stronger in its place. Mom knew that. Now I did too. I joined my family in the garden, where new things were ready to grow.
The ultrasound image trembled in my hands, its grainy black and white shapes holding all my dreams. 2 heartbeats, mine racing, and somewhere in that fuzzy constellation, my baby's steady rhythm. After 3 years of trying, of temperature charts and disappointments, there it was. Life. I want a divorce. Jason's voice cut through my moment like a blade. I looked up from the image, certain I'd misheard. My husband stood by our bedroom window, his back to me, shoulders rigid beneath his expensive suit. What did you say? You heard me, Fiona. He turned, and I saw nothing of the man I'd married in his eyes. I never wanted this. Any of it. The image crumpled slightly in my grip. Any of what? A baby. A family. This whole domestic fantasy you've been chasing. He gestured vaguely at our bedroom, at the home we'd built together. I played along because it made you happy, but I can't do it anymore. My throat closed up. Played along? For 8 years? Look, I've got a chance at partnership. Real partnership, not just senior associate. I can't be tied down with a kid right now. It's not in my plans. I pressed my hand against my still flat stomach. Our child isn't in your plans? Don't make this harder than it needs to be. He loosened his tie, a nervous habit I'd once found endearing. I've already talked to my lawyer. You can keep the house. I'll pay support, whatever's fair. But I'm done playing house. The room spun slightly. I sat on the edge of our bed, the same bed where we'd made this baby, where he'd held me through failed attempts and crushing disappointments. When what? When did you decide our marriage was just playing house? He checked his watch, impatient. Does it matter? The papers will be ready tomorrow. I'm staying at the Marriott until I find a place. Tomorrow? The word came out as a whisper. You've planned this. Of course I planned it. I'm not an idiot. He grabbed a pre-packed suitcase from the closet, one I hadn't even noticed was there. I knew you'd get emotional about this. Emotional. Like my feelings were an inconvenience, a feminine weakness he had to manage. I smoothed out the ultrasound image, trying to focus on that tiny heartbeat. Who is she? His pause told me everything. That's not important. 8 years of marriage, and you can't even give me the truth? Fine. Her name is Lily. She understands my ambitions. She doesn't need this. He waved at me, at my stomach, at our life together. I stood up, surprising myself with how steady my legs felt. Get out. Fiona. Get out. Each word was a bullet. Your lawyer can call mine. But right now, get out of my house. He grabbed his suitcase, pausing at the door. I never meant to hurt you. I laughed, a harsh sound that scared even me. Yes, you did. You meant to hurt me less, maybe. But you knew exactly what you were doing. After he left, I sat in the silence of our bedroom, my bedroom now, and looked at the ultrasound again. My baby. My child. The tears finally came, but with them came something else, steel in my spine, ice in my veins. It's just us now, little one, I whispered to the image. But I promise you this, you will never doubt that you're wanted. You will never wonder if you're enough. And your father? I took a deep breath. Your father will learn that some games have consequences. I placed the ultrasound on my nightstand and picked up my phone. My parents would be my first call. They'd always warned me about Jason's charm hiding something darker. Then my lawyer. Then my doctor. I had a life to rebuild, and a child to protect. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. My parents' kitchen smelled exactly as it had when I was a child: cinnamon, coffee, and my mother's endless supply of fresh-baked bread. The familiar scent should have been comforting. Instead, it made my throat tight with unshed tears. He did what? My father's coffee cup hit the table hard enough to splash. That spineless little Thomas. My mother's hand covered his, a gentle restraint. She turned to me, her eyes sharp despite her soft voice. When did this happen, sweetheart? Yesterday. I traced the wood grain of their kitchen table, the same one I'd done my homework on decades ago. He had it all planned out. Lawyer, new apartment, everything. And the baby? Mother's grip tightened on father's hand. Doesn't want anything to do with either of us. The words tasted bitter. He's got his career to think about, apparently. Father pushed back from the table, pacing the kitchen like a caged bear. 8 years. 8 years we welcomed that man into our family, and this is how he... Thomas, please. Mother's voice carried that steel I remembered from childhood arguments. This isn't helping. I pulled out the ultrasound image, already creased from constant handling, and placed it on the table. Mother's breath caught. Oh, darling. She moved to my side, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. Your room is exactly as you left it. I can't stay here. The words came out faster than I intended. I mean, I appreciate it, but... Nonsense. Father stopped pacing. The house is too big for just us anyway. And you'll need help with the baby. I need to stand on my own feet. I straightened my spine, meeting their concerned gazes. Jason's offering to let me keep the house. With the divorce settlement and my savings, I can manage the mortgage. The house? Mother's tone sharpened. The house you both chose? Where you plan to raise your family? Darling, every room will remind you of him. She was right, of course. I'd spent the night staring at the ceiling, remembering every moment, every promise, every lie. Then I'll sell it. Start fresh somewhere else. You don't have to decide everything today. Mother squeezed my shoulder. Stay with us for a while. Clear your head. A knock at the front door interrupted my response. Father went to answer it, his footsteps heavy with purpose. Margaret? His voice carried an odd note. You might want to come here. Mother exchanged a look with me before heading to the door. I followed, curious despite myself. Lily Carter stood on our porch, looking nothing like the polished photos I'd found on social media last night. Her mascara was smeared, her designer clothes rumpled. I'm so sorry, she blurted before anyone could speak. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know he was married when we met. He told me you were separated, that the divorce was almost final. How long? The question came out calmer than I felt. She flinched. 6 months. 6 months. While I was tracking ovulation and praying for a miracle, my husband was. I pressed a hand to my stomach, suddenly nauseated. I found out about the baby from his phone. Lily's voice cracked. He left it unlocked, and I saw the messages from his lawyer. About the divorce, about you being pregnant. I couldn't. I had to. You had to what? Mother's voice could have frozen hell. Tell you I'm sorry. And warn you. Lily glanced over her shoulder nervously. He's not just leaving. He's transferring all his assets. Moving them offshore. He's planning to leave me with nothing. The pieces clicked into place. The house offer, the quick divorce. He's running. Father's hand gripped the doorframe. Over my dead body. I studied Lily, young, beautiful, exactly Jason's type. But there was something in her eyes, something familiar. The same betrayal I felt burning in my chest. Thank you, I said quietly. For telling me. She nodded once, then hurried back to her car. We watched her drive away in silence. Well, Mother said finally. I believe I'll make some more coffee. We have planning to do. I followed them back to the kitchen, my mind racing. Jason thought he could discard us like unwanted baggage. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The game wasn't just beginning. It was changing entirely. The box of memories sat on my bedroom floor like a time bomb. 8 years of photographs, letters, and mementos, all lies wrapped in pretty paper. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. My phone buzzed. Another message from Jason's lawyer. I ignored it, just like I'd ignored the last 6. Let them wait. I had more pressing matters to attend to. The first photo showed our wedding day. Jason's perfect smile, my radiant happiness. I remembered the photographer commenting on how photogenic we were, how in love we looked. Now I could see what I'd missed then, the calculated gleam in Jason's eyes, the way his hand gripped my waist like a possession. The doorbell rang. I ignored that too. Deeper in the box, I found the fertility clinic receipts. 3 years of treatments, each one more expensive than the last. Each one paid for from my inheritance. While Jason's salary went to investing in our future. I wondered now what, or who, that future had really included. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. Go away. I shouted, knowing they couldn't hear me upstairs. But the ringing continued, followed by heavy knocking. Cursing, I stormed downstairs, ready to tell Jason's lawyer exactly where they could shove their settlement papers. But when I yanked open the door, it wasn't a lawyer standing there. It was Henry Carter. Lily's father. Miss Blake. His police training showed in his stance, in the careful way he assessed me. May I come in? There are things you need to know. I should have said no. Should have shut the door and gone back to my box of lies. Instead, I stepped aside. Henry moved through my house like he was cataloging evidence, his eyes taking in every detail. Lily told me she came to see you. Yesterday. I crossed my arms. She seemed upset. She should be. She's not the first. He turned to face me. There were others before her. Before you, even. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. What? Jason Blake has a pattern. Henry's voice carried the weight of certainty. He finds women with money or potential. Convinces them to invest in his schemes. Then he disappears with everything. A laugh bubbled up, bitter as poison. Let me guess, offshore accounts? Among other things. Henry pulled out his phone, showing me a series of documents. I'd been tracking him since he started dating Lily. His previous victims never pressed charges, too embarrassed, too afraid of scandal. But you're different. Because I'm pregnant. Because you have proof. He gestured around the house. Financial records. Joint accounts. And most importantly, you have witnesses to his character and behavior. My mind raced. Lily. She's willing to testify. About the affair, about his plans to leave the country. Henry's expression hardened. He's done this to 5 other women, Miss Blake. 5 lives destroyed because no one stopped him. I sank onto the couch, my hand instinctively covering my stomach. Why are you telling me this? Because my daughter made a mistake getting involved with him, but she's trying to make it right. And because you're in a position to end this cycle. He sat across from me. But we need to move fast. Before he transfers everything overseas. Upstairs, my box of memories waited. 8 years of carefully constructed lies, all leading to this moment. What do you need me to do? File charges. Today. My old partner handles financial crimes. He can freeze Jason's accounts before he moves anything else. I thought of the ultrasound picture, of the baby who would never know their father's love. Of the other women who'd trusted Jason, only to be left with nothing. Okay. I stood up, steel replacing the shock in my spine. Let's end this. Henry nodded, already dialing his phone. As he spoke to his former partner, I climbed back upstairs to my box of memories. One by one, I fed the photos into the fireplace, watching Jason's perfect smile turn to ash. The game had changed again. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about justice, not just for me and my baby, but for all the women who'd come before. And this time, Jason wouldn't know what hit him until it was too late. The morning sickness hit just as I was reviewing resumes at my parents' kitchen table. 4 months pregnant and still no job. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years building Jason's career, and now I couldn't even land an entry-level position. My phone buzzed. Henry Carter's name flashed on the screen. They've frozen his accounts, Henry said without preamble. But we were too late for some of it. He'd already moved close to $2 million offshore. The room spun, and not from morning sickness. $2 million. That's impossible. We never had that much. It wasn't just your money. His voice hardened. The other women, the investments he convinced them to make, he's been planning this for years. I gripped the edge of the table. What about the house? Mortgage to the hilt. He took out 3 equity loans in the past year alone. The perfect house, the perfect life, all built on quicksand. He knew. Even when we were trying for a baby, he knew he was leaving. A knock at the door interrupted Henry's response. My mother answered it, and I heard raised voices in the hallway. I need to go, I told Henry, ending the call as Jason stormed into the kitchen. What the hell did you do? His perfect facade had cracked, showing something ugly underneath. Do you have any idea what you've done? My mother appeared behind him, phone in hand. I'm calling the police. No. I stood, one hand protectively over my stomach. Let him speak. I want to hear his explanation. Explanation? Jason laughed, a harsh sound. You froze my accounts. Destroyed years of work. For what? Revenge? Justice. The word tasted sweet. For every woman you've conned. Every life you've ruined. His expression shifted, becoming the charming mask I'd fallen for years ago. Sweetheart, you don't understand. Those investments were legitimate. I was building something for us, for our future. Don't. My voice shook. Don't you dare pretend this was for us. Henry Carter showed me everything. Henry Carter? Jason's mask slipped again. What does Lily's father have to do with this? He's a retired detective. Specialized in financial crimes. I watched the color drain from Jason's face. Did you know that? Did you check before you started dating his daughter? You stupid bitch. He stepped toward me, hands clenched. You have no idea what you've done. My mother moved between us. Get out of my house. This isn't over. Jason's eyes locked on mine. You think you're protecting that baby? You've just made sure it'll grow up with nothing. Better nothing than your poison. The words came from somewhere deep inside, somewhere that had been silent too long. Better alone than raised by a liar and a thief. He reached for me, but another voice cut through the tension. Touch her, and it's assault charges on top of fraud. Henry Carter stood in the doorway, badge in hand. Your choice, Blake. Jason's arm dropped. He looked between us, calculating odds like he always did. Finally, he stepped back. You'll regret this, he said softly. Both of you. After he left, my legs gave out. I sank into a chair, trembling. Are you all right? Mother's hand was cool on my forehead. No. I looked up at Henry. But I will be. What happens now? Now? Henry sat across from me. Now we build a case. Every victim, every fraudulent investment, every false promise. It won't be easy. Some women won't want to come forward. But some will. I thought of Lily, of her smeared mascara and shaking hands. Some of us are tired of being victims. It could take months, Henry warned. Maybe years. I pressed my hand against my growing belly, feeling the flutter of movement. Then we better get started. This baby deserves to be born into a world where their father can't hurt anyone else. Mother squeezed my shoulder. We'll help. Whatever you need. I nodded, my mind already racing ahead. Jason thought he'd left me with nothing. But he'd given me something invaluable, a purpose. A mission. And I would see it through, not just for my child, but for every woman who'd trusted him and lost everything. The game wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. And justice, I was learning, was a dish best served methodically. The contractions started during a meeting with Henry and the prosecutor. 38 weeks pregnant, and my son chose this moment to make his entrance. Perfect timing, just like his father. We need to get you to the hospital, Henry said, already reaching for his keys. I gripped the edge of the conference table. Not yet. Finish telling me about the offshore accounts. The prosecutor, Sarah Chen, exchanged looks with Henry. The accounts can wait. No. Another contraction hit, stronger this time. Jason's hearing is tomorrow. I need to know everything. You need to have this baby, Henry countered. The hearing will proceed whether you're there or not. A sharp knock interrupted us. The door opened, revealing Lily, her face pale. He's gone. The room went silent. My contraction forgotten, I straightened. What do you mean, gone? Jason. Lily's voice cracked. He emptied our joint accounts this morning. Left a note saying he was sorry, that he never meant to hurt anyone. She laughed bitterly. As if that makes it better. The prosecutor shuffled through her papers. The court order. Doesn't matter. Lily tossed her phone onto the table. He's already out of the country. Dubai, probably. He always talked about Dubai. Another contraction ripped through me, this one bringing me to my knees. Through the haze of pain, I heard voices arguing, phones ringing, plans unraveling. Hospital, I gasped. Now. The next hours blurred together. Contractions, monitors beeping, nurses coming and going. My parents arrived, then Henry, then more lawyers. Through it all, one thought kept circling, Jason had won. Again. Push, the doctor ordered, and I did, channeling all my rage and frustration into bringing my son into the world. At 3:47 a.m., Oliver Thomas Blake announced his arrival with a cry that seemed to shake the walls. They placed him on my chest, this tiny person who'd been my anchor through the storm, and everything else fell away. "Hello, little one," I whispered. "I've been waiting for you." Hours later, when the room had quieted and my parents had gone home to rest, Henry appeared in the doorway. "You should be resting," he said, but his expression told me there was news. "Tell me." He sat heavily in the visitor's chair. Interpol flagged his passport in Singapore. He's moving money through shell companies, trying to stay ahead of the freeze orders. I looked down at Oliver, peaceful in his hospital bassinet. He planned this all along. The hearing, the negotiations, it was just buying time. "Yes." Henry's voice softened. "I'm sorry, Fiona. We thought we had him cornered. Don't apologize." I touched Oliver's tiny hand, marveling at his perfect fingers. "We'll find him. It could take years. International cases. Then it takes years." Something shifted inside me, a resolve hardening into certainty. He thinks having a baby means I'll give up, that I'll be too busy with diapers and midnight feedings to pursue him. "Won't you be?" I met Henry's gaze. "Every night when I feed my son, I'll be planning. Every diaper I change will remind me why I'm fighting. And one day, when Oliver's old enough to understand, I'll tell him how his father tried to steal his future, and how we got it back." Henry studied me for a long moment. "This isn't just about the money anymore, is it?" It never was. I watched Oliver's chest rise and fall with his tiny breaths. "It's about justice. For every woman he betrayed, every child he abandoned. He doesn't get to win just because he ran." "What do you need from me?" "Everything you know about international finance law." I smiled, feeling stronger than I had in months. "And maybe some coffee. We have work to do." Henry nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I'll make some calls." As he left, I lifted Oliver into my arms. "Your father thinks he's escaped, little one. But he doesn't understand what he's created. A mother's love isn't just soft and gentle, it's fierce and relentless. And I promise you this, he will answer for what he's done. Not just to me, but to everyone he's hurt." Oliver yawned, oblivious to the weight of the moment. But I felt it, this turning point where grief transformed into purpose. Jason had given me one final gift, a reason to never stop fighting. The game wasn't over. It had barely begun. 20 years vanished in an instant when I saw him across the restaurant. Jason hadn't aged well, his hair had grayed at the temples, and his once athletic frame had softened. But that smile, that practiced charm as he worked the room, hadn't changed at all. "Mom?" Oliver's voice pulled me back. My son, our son, sat across from me, celebrating his 20th birthday in the same restaurant where Jason had proposed all those years ago. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Before I could respond, Jason turned. Our eyes met, and the world stopped spinning. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by something else, calculation. Always calculating. He started walking toward our table. "Oliver," I said quietly, "whatever happens next, remember that I love you." "Mom, what?" Well. Jason's voice was exactly as I remembered. "Fiona Blake. You look comfortable." I felt Oliver tense beside me. "And you look like a man who's been running for 20 years. Jason's smile didn't waver. Is this him? Is this my boy? I'm not your anything. Oliver's voice carried the same steel I'd heard in my own all those years ago. And this is a private dinner. Can't a father want to know his son? Jason pulled up a chair uninvited. We have so much to catch up on. Like the 2 million you stole? I kept my voice steady. Or the other families you destroyed? His expression hardened. Still bitter, Fiona? After all these years? Not bitter. I met his gaze. Just patient. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He glanced around the restaurant, probably noting the exits. You knew I'd be here. This restaurant's new owner is an interesting woman. I smiled. Lily sends her regards. Jason's charm cracked. You've been tracking me. For 20 years. Oliver's voice was cold. Every shell company, every false identity. Did you really think Mom would just give up? Henry Carter's been teaching him well, I added. He has quite a talent for financial forensics. Jason stood abruptly, but 2 men in suits appeared at his shoulders. Sir, one said quietly, please come with us. You can't prove anything. Jason's voice shook slightly. It's been too long. The statute of limitations doesn't apply to ongoing fraud. Oliver stood, and I saw Jason register how tall his son had grown, how confident he was. Which you've been committing across 3 continents. Did you think Dubai would protect you forever? This is what you taught him? Jason spat at me. To betray his own father? No. I stood too, feeling stronger than I had in years. I taught him about justice. About consequences. About being a man who keeps his promises. Mom taught me everything you didn't. Oliver's words cut like knives. Including how to wait for the right moment. The agents led Jason away, his protests fading into the murmur of the restaurant. I sank back into my chair, 20 years of tension draining away. Are you okay? Oliver touched my hand. I thought I'd feel different. I watched through the window as they put Jason in a car. More satisfied, maybe. Or vindicated. What do you feel? Tired. I turned back to my son, my brilliant, compassionate son who'd grown up without a father but never without love. And a little sad. For him, mostly. He never knew what he gave up. His choice. Oliver squeezed my hand. Not yours. My phone buzzed, a message from Henry. More of Jason's victims were coming forward, encouraged by his arrest. The house of cards was finally falling. Happy birthday, sweetheart. I managed a smile. I'm sorry it turned out like this. Don't be. Oliver's expression was serious. This was the best gift you could have given me. Not revenge, justice. For all of us. I watched my son, so different from his father, so much more than I'd ever dreamed possible, and felt the weight of 2 decades begin to lift. Jason was finally facing consequences, but that wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was sitting across from me, strong and whole despite everything. The game was ending, but something else was beginning. Something that felt a lot like freedom. Let's order dessert, I said. We have a lot to celebrate. The prison visiting room smelled of disinfectant and desperation. Jason sat across from me, his orange jumpsuit a jarring contrast to the designer suits he'd once worn. 3 weeks in custody had stripped away his polish, leaving something raw and unfamiliar beneath. You're my last hope, Fiona. His voice cracked. They're talking 20 years. 20 years of my life, gone. Like the 20 years you stole from others? I kept my voice neutral, watching his hands fidget on the table. I can make it right. He leaned forward, that old charm struggling to surface. I know where the money is. All of it. Help me make a deal, and everyone gets paid back. Everyone except Oliver. He flinched. I never meant. To get caught? I finished. Or to have your son help bring you down? He's my son too. Anger flashed across his face. You turned him against me. No, Jason. You did that yourself. I pulled out a folder, copies of documents Lily had gathered over years. Just like you did with every other family you destroyed. His eyes fixed on the folder. Lily gave you those? She's been collecting evidence since before your wedding. Smart woman. I smiled slightly. She learned from your previous wives. Previous, understanding dawned in his eyes. Sarah Chen. The prosecutor. Your second wife. Though you never actually divorced her before marrying Lily, did you? I laid out photos, Jason with different women, different names. Different lives. Henry helped us find them all. 7 marriages, Jason. 7 families. It wasn't personal. Sweat beaded on his forehead. It was business. Investment opportunities. Tell that to the children. I pushed forward another photo, a group shot of kids ranging from teenagers to toddlers. Your children, Jason. All of them growing up without a father. He shoved back from the table. What do you want from me? Nothing. The word felt like freedom. I'm here because you asked to see me. Because you thought you could manipulate me one last time. Then why come? His mask cracked completely, showing genuine confusion. To show you what you threw away. I stood, gathering the photos. Oliver graduates law school next month. Top of his class. He's already been offered a position with the Financial Crimes Unit. Following in Henry's footsteps. Jason sneered. Playing hero? Being the man you never were. I met his gaze. The other kids? They're thriving too. Sarah's daughter is a doctor. Amanda's twins just started college. They all grew up strong, Jason. Not because of you, but because of the mothers who loved them enough to stay. Is that supposed to make me feel guilty? No. I headed for the door, then paused. It's supposed to make you understand what real wealth is. And why you'll always be poor. Fiona. His voice stopped me. I did love you. In the beginning. I turned back one last time. No, Jason. You loved what I could give you. There's a difference. What happens now? Now? I thought of Oliver, of the family we'd built without Jason. Now you face justice. Not just legal justice, but the kind that comes from knowing your son chose to be everything you're not. He'll regret it. Jason's final attempt at control. One day, he'll understand why I did what I did. No. I smiled, feeling decades of weight lift from my shoulders. He already understands. That's why he helped stop you. As I left the prison, my phone buzzed. A message from Oliver. Mom, dinner at Grandma and Grandpa's tonight. Henry and Lily are coming too. Family meeting about the foundation. The foundation, Oliver's idea to help families affected by financial fraud. Born from our pain, but growing into something beautiful. Something healing. I texted back, on my way. Love you. The game was truly over now. Jason would spend years in prison, but we'd spend them building something he could never understand, a legacy of justice, compassion, and unbreakable family bonds. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, loving deeply, and letting go of the ghosts that once haunted us. I got in my car and headed home, toward the family that had chosen to stay, to fight, to love. Toward the future we'd built from the ashes of Jason's betrayal. And I didn't look back once. My parents' backyard glowed with string lights, the summer evening perfect for celebrating Oliver's law school graduation. The faces around the table had changed over the years. Henry's hair had gone completely white, Lily had found peace in her new life. And my parents moved a bit slower, but the love remained constant. Oliver stood at the head of the table, champagne glass in hand. The Blake Carter Foundation helped its 100th family this week. Applause rippled through our gathering. I watched my son, so tall, so sure of himself, and saw echoes of the baby I'd once promised to protect. But that's not why I called everyone together tonight. He reached into his pocket, producing an envelope. This came from the prison today. The air stilled. Henry leaned forward. Jason? He's dying. Oliver's voice stayed steady. Cancer. He wants to make amends, tell the truth about everything. After all this time? Lily's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. He claims he has records of other victims we never found. Oliver met my eyes. He'll only talk to me. The old anger stirred, but it felt distant now, like thunder from a storm that had long passed. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about that first family we helped. Oliver sat beside me. Remember? The mother with 3 kids, living in her car after her husband emptied their accounts? I nodded. How could I forget? She'd reminded me so much of myself. We gave her justice, but more importantly, we gave her hope. He spread the foundation's latest reports across the table. Every person we've helped is another chain broken, another cycle ended. And now Jason wants to help break more chains? Henry's skepticism was clear. I don't think he wants to help anyone. Oliver's smile held a wisdom beyond his years. I think he wants to die feeling less guilty. But his motives don't matter, the truth does. My mother reached across the table, squeezing my hand. What do you think, sweetheart? I looked around at my family, not bound by blood or law, but by choice and love. At Henry, who'd taught Oliver to fight injustice with intelligence rather than anger. At Lily, who'd turned her pain into purpose. At my parents, whose unwavering support had given me strength when I had none. I think, I said slowly, that revenge was never the point. Justice was never about punishing Jason, it was about helping others heal. Oliver nodded. That's why I'm going to see him. Not for him, but for the families who still need answers. We'll go with you, Henry said, and Lily nodded in agreement. No. Oliver's voice was gentle but firm. I need to do this alone. Mom taught me that strength isn't about carrying burdens alone, but sometimes we have to face our ghosts by ourselves. I touched the empty chair beside me, the one we'd started leaving empty at family gatherings, not for Jason, but as a reminder of why we did this work. Your father gave us an unexpected gift, Oliver. He showed us what family isn't, so we could build what it should be. To family, my father raised his glass, in all its forms. As glasses clinked and conversation resumed, Oliver pulled me aside. Are you really okay with this, Mom? I looked at my son, this remarkable man who'd taken our pain and transformed it into purpose. I'm more than okay. I'm proud. Not because you're facing Jason, but because you're doing it for the right reasons. I learned from the best. He hugged me, and for a moment I felt the echo of that tiny baby I'd once promised to protect. The string lights swayed in the evening breeze, casting shifting shadows across our gathering. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new stories of betrayal to unravel, new families to help. But tonight, in this garden filled with love and laughter, I finally understood, sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the game, but in changing its rules entirely. And we had done exactly that.
The sound of dirt hitting my father's casket should have been the worst thing I heard today. It wasn't. That honor belongs to my husband's whispered ultimatum, delivered between clenched teeth while he gripped my elbow too tight. Either we move in with my parents, or I'm filing for divorce. I'm Willow, and this is how my marriage died on the same day we buried my father. The funeral crowd had thinned to just family now, if you could call Jake's parents that anymore. Martha stood across the grave, her vulture-like stare boring into me while Henry hovered at her shoulder like a shadow. They'd been circling closer all afternoon, probably rehearsing their practice speeches about family duty and doing what's best. You're hurting me, I said, trying to pull away from Jake's grip. He loosened his hold but didn't let go. "This isn't a negotiation, Willow. Dad's retiring next month. They need us. My father's body isn't even cold." "Exactly. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly about what's best for everyone." I stared at the fresh dirt, fighting the urge to laugh. Or scream. Or both. What's best for everyone? Or what's best for your mother? Don't start with that again. Jake's voice carried that familiar warning tone, the one that usually made me back down. Mom and Dad have given us everything. The least we can do is help them transition into retirement. Samuel, my father's oldest friend, approached slowly from the cemetery path. His presence was like a lifeline, and Jake's grip finally fell away. Martha's eyes narrowed at the interruption. "Willow, dear," Samuel said, his weathered face creased with genuine concern. "Your father would have wanted you to take some time. Process things." "We're family," Martha cut in, gliding forward. "We'll help her process. Won't we, Jake?" I watched my husband nod, the same way he always did when his mother spoke. 15 years of marriage, and I'd never seen him refuse her anything. The weight of my father's estate papers felt heavy in my purse, papers Jake didn't know about yet. Papers that would change everything. "I need to go," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I have things to arrange at the house." "Our house," Jake corrected. "And it's too big for one person. Mom and Dad's place makes more sense." I said I need to go. Samuel touched my shoulder. "I'll drive you." "She's fine," Jake snapped. "I'll take my wife home." "Actually," I said, "I'm not fine. And I'm not going anywhere with you right now." Martha gasped, perfectly timed for maximum dramatic effect. "Jake, darling, you see how she's acting? This is exactly why she needs us." I turned away, Samuel falling into step beside me. Behind us, I could hear Martha's voice rising. Could practically see Jake's face reddening with that specific shade of embarrassment his mother always managed to produce. "You can't just walk away from family," Martha called after me. But I could. I was. The truth hit me halfway to Samuel's car. I'd been walking away from myself for 15 years, one small step at a time. Letting Jake's family reshape me into their idea of a proper wife. Watching my own dreams fade like old photographs. Not anymore. Samuel opened the car door, and I slid inside, my hands shaking as I buckled the seatbelt. Through the windshield, I could see Jake and his parents huddled together, 3 heads bent in conversation. Planning their next move, no doubt. Let them plan. They didn't know about the recordings yet. Or the letters. Or the truth about what my father had discovered before he died. They had no idea what was coming. Samuel's car pulled up to my father's estate, my estate now, just as the sun was setting. The old Victorian shadow stretched across the lawn like a warning. Jake's Mercedes already sat in the driveway, a sleek reminder that I couldn't avoid what was coming. "You don't have to go in alone," Samuel said, his hands still gripping the steering wheel. "Actually, I do." I gathered my purse, feeling the weight of the estate papers inside. "But thank you. For everything." The front door opened before I reached it. Jake stood there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up like he was ready for battle. Behind him, I could hear Martha's voice floating from the kitchen, probably already reorganizing my cabinets. "Nice of you to finally join us," Jake said, stepping aside to let me pass. "Mom's making dinner. In my kitchen. Our kitchen, Willow." And she's trying to help. I moved past him, the familiar scent of Martha's signature pot roast hitting me like a slap. She'd cooked the same meal for every major event in our married life, birthdays, anniversaries, the day Jake made partner at his firm. Now here it was again, on the day we buried my father. "There you are." Martha's voice carried that artificial brightness she reserved for public performances. She stood at my counter, wearing an apron I'd never seen before, probably brought from her own house. "Henry, look who finally made it home." My father-in-law barely glanced up from his phone, mumbling something that might have been a greeting. "I'm not hungry," I said, heading for the stairs. Jake caught my arm. "Mom went to all this trouble." "Let her go, darling," Martha cut in, her knife clicking against the cutting board. "She's grieving. Though I do wish she'd consider how her behavior affects others." I jerked away from Jake's grip, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Behind me, I heard Martha's stage whisper, "You see what I mean? This is exactly why she needs us here." My father's study door was ajar. I pushed it open, expecting the familiar comfort of his space. Instead, I froze. The room had been ransacked. Drawers hung open, papers scattered across the desk. The painting behind his chair, the one he'd always joked contained his secrets, hung crooked on the wall. My hands shook as I straightened it, revealing the wall safe behind. Still locked. Thank God. Looking for something specific? I spun around. Jake stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. "What did you do?" "Me?" He stepped inside, closing the door. "I was looking for the will. Since you ran off with Samuel instead of discussing things like an adult. The will is with the lawyers. You know that." "Do I?" "You've been awfully secretive lately." He moved closer, and I caught a whiff of scotch on his breath. "Just like your father was, at the end." A chill ran through me. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Jake said, his voice dropping, "that I know he changed his will 3 weeks ago. Right after our last dinner together. Right after Martha and I told him about our plans for developing this property." The pieces clicked into place. The tension at that dinner. My father's sudden insistence on updating his estate planning. The way Jake and Martha had been hovering ever since, watching Dad like hawks. "You were planning this before he even died?" "Planning what?" "To take care of family? To make something of this oversized monument to your father's ego?" Jake ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. "Your father was sick, Willow. He wasn't thinking clearly." Footsteps creaked on the stairs, followed by Martha's voice, "Everything all right up there?" "Fine, Mom," Jake called back, his eyes never leaving mine. "Willow's just having a moment." I moved toward the door, but he blocked my path. "We're not done here." "Actually," I said, "I think we are. On several levels." His laugh was ugly. "You really want to do this? Fight me over a house and some land? Because I promise you, Willow, you won't win." I thought of the recordings in my purse. The letters. The truth about what Jake and his family had been planning all along. "We'll see about that," I said, pushing past him into the hallway. Martha stood at the top of the stairs, concern painted perfectly across her face. "Dinner's ready, dears. Why don't we all sit down and talk about this like family?" Family. The word had never sounded more like a threat. The blueprints spread across Samuel's kitchen table might as well have been a death sentence for my father's estate. Architectural drawings showed modern buildings sprawling across the land, cutting through gardens my father had tended for 30 years. The date in the corner, 3 months ago, burned into my vision. Jake had these drawn up before Dad even got sick, I said, my fingers tracing the sharp lines that would destroy everything my father built. Look at his signature here. And Martha's company logo. Samuel placed a steaming mug of coffee beside me. There's more. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, I found emails between Jake and various developers, all dated weeks before my father's death. The language was careful, coded, but the intent was clear. They'd been planning to transform the estate into a luxury family compound, complete with separate wings for Jake's parents. They were just waiting for him to die. Not exactly, Samuel said, pulling out another document. They were waiting for him to sign this. The paper trembled in my hands as I read. A transfer of power of attorney, drafted but never signed. My father's signature line sat empty at the bottom, a small victory from beyond the grave. My phone buzzed, another message from Jake. I'd left the house last night after refusing to join their family dinner, and he'd been alternating between threats and pleading ever since. You should read this one, Samuel said, holding up a final email. It's from Martha to the developers, dated 2 weeks before your father's death. The words blurred through tears of rage. Once we secure power of attorney, we can proceed regardless of Willow's objections. Jake assures me she'll fall in line or face consequences. A key turned in Samuel's front door. I scrambled to gather the papers, but Samuel held up a hand. I invited someone. Henry stepped into the kitchen, looking smaller somehow without Martha hovering nearby. His eyes fell on the blueprints. So you found them, he said. Did you know? I demanded. The whole time, did you know what they were planning? He sank into a chair, suddenly every bit his 62 years. Martha said it was for the best. That we'd all be together, like a real family should be. By destroying my father's home? Your father. Henry's laugh was bitter. Do you know what Martha called him? The obstacle. Every night, planning and plotting, while I sat there watching my wife and son turn into people I didn't recognize. My phone buzzed again. Jake's message flashed across the screen, Mom's lawyers are ready. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. They're meeting with contractors today, Henry said, pulling out his own phone. Martha thinks she's won already. She's picking out paint colors for her wing of the house. I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. They can't. The property isn't even. They don't care, Henry cut in. They never have. It's always been about control. Martha's control. And Jake. He shook his head. Jake never learned to say no to her. Samuel touched my arm. Show him. I pulled out my father's last letter from my purse, the one I'd found in the safe after Jake's failed search. Henry read it slowly, his face growing paler with each line. Your father knew, he whispered. All this time, he knew what they were planning. And he left me everything I need to stop them. I gathered the blueprints and emails. The question is, Henry, whose side are you really on? He stared at his hands for a long moment. When he looked up, something had shifted in his eyes. Martha's at the estate now, he said. She's meeting the contractors at noon. She thinks. He swallowed hard. She thinks she's finally winning. She's not, I said, checking my watch. Because in exactly 45 minutes, I'm going to show her what losing really looks like. Samuel picked up his car keys. I'll drive. Henry stood, straightening his shoulders. I'm coming too. It's time someone stood up to Martha. Even if it has to be me. My phone buzzed one final time. Jake's message was just one line: last chance, Willow. Don't do anything you'll regret. But as we headed for Samuel's car, regret was the last thing on my mind. They wanted a war over my father's legacy? Fine. I'd give them one they'd never forget. Martha's face turned ashen when we walked into the estate's garden. She stood among a cluster of contractors, architectural plans spread across a portable table. Her perfectly manicured finger frozen midpoint on the paper. Jake's expression shifted from confusion to rage as Henry stepped out from behind me. What is he doing here? Martha's voice could have frozen hell. Telling the truth, for once, Henry said. The contractors shifted uncomfortably as I approached the table. One of them, older, with kind eyes, glanced between the blueprints and my face. Mrs. Davidson, I wasn't aware this was a contested development. It's not contested, Jake cut in, moving to stand beside his mother. My wife is just emotional right now. Her father's passing. Her father's murder, you mean? Samuel's quiet words dropped like bombs in the garden. Martha's clipboard clattered to the ground. Jake went still. What did you say? His voice was dangerous, low. I pulled out my father's last letter, along with the medical reports we'd found hidden in his safe. Dad knew about the development plans. He also knew about the sleeping pills Martha had been slipping into his evening tea. Convenient timing, wasn't it? His sudden decline just when you needed him to sign over power of attorney? That's ridiculous, Martha snapped, but her hands were shaking. Henry, tell them how ridiculous this is. I found the pills in your purse, Martha. Henry's voice cracked. 3 days before he died. I told myself I was imagining things. That you wouldn't. That our son wouldn't. The contractors were already packing up, murmuring apologies and quick exits. The older one paused beside me, pressing his card into my hand. Call us when this is sorted, Mrs. Davidson. Legally sorted. Jake grabbed my arm as I tried to follow them. You're making a mistake. The mistake was thinking you ever loved me more than your mother's approval. I jerked away from him. The police are already reviewing the evidence. They're very interested in Martha's monthly prescriptions for sleeping medication. And the timing of your development plans. You wouldn't dare. Martha's perfect facade cracked. After everything we've done for you. Done for me? The laugh that escaped me didn't sound like my own. You mean like systematically isolating me from my friends? Criticizing every decision I made? Planning to destroy my father's legacy while he was still alive? We were trying to help, Jake insisted, but his eyes darted to the medical reports in my hand. Mom just wanted what was best for everyone. Best for everyone? Henry's voice rose. Our son is facing possible conspiracy charges because you couldn't wait a few more months for a legal inheritance? Because you had to control everything, everyone, all the time? Martha turned on him, teeth bared. Don't you dare turn on me now. Everything I did for this family. No. I held up my phone, recording app running. Everything you did for yourself. And now everyone's going to know exactly what kind of person you are. Jake lunged for the phone, but Samuel stepped between us. In the distance, sirens wailed. That'll be Detective Morris, Samuel said quietly. He's very interested in speaking with all of you. Martha's composure shattered completely. Jake, do something. But Jake just stood there, looking lost, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. For the first time, I saw him clearly, not as my husband or Martha's son, but as a hollow man who'd never had the courage to be himself. It's over, I said, watching police cars turn into the driveway. The estate stays as it is. And you all get to explain to the police exactly why my father died 3 days before your development plans were set to begin. You'll regret this, Martha hissed, but her eyes were wild with fear. I thought of my father's last days, of the confusion in his eyes that we'd all dismissed as natural decline. Of the team Martha insisted on preparing herself. Of Jake's convenient business trips that kept him away from witnessing his mother's frequent visits. No, I said, watching Detective Morris approach with his officers. I don't think I will. The handcuffs clicked shut around Martha's wrists, and somewhere in the garden, a bird began to sing. Detective Morris's words echoed through the estate's empty living room. Martha made bail an hour ago. I gripped the armchair, knuckles white. Through the window, I could see Henry pacing the garden, phone pressed to his ear. He hadn't spoken to Martha since her arrest 3 days ago. What about Jake? My voice sounded distant, even to myself. Still in custody. Morris flipped through his notes. But his lawyer's good. Very good. They're already spinning a story about him being manipulated by his mother, claiming he had no knowledge of the sleeping pills. Samuel set a glass of water in front of me, but I couldn't bring myself to drink. He knew. He had to know. Proving it is another matter. Morris leaned forward. We need more than circumstantial evidence. Something concrete linking him directly to your father's death. My phone buzzed, another text from an unknown number. I'd been getting them since Martha's arrest, each one more threatening than the last. This one made my blood freeze. Check the greenhouse. Willow? Samuel touched my shoulder. What is it? I was already moving, Morris and Samuel following as I rushed across the lawn. The greenhouse had been my father's sanctuary, filled with rare orchids he'd spent decades cultivating. The door hung slightly ajar. Inside, devastation greeted us. Every plant had been methodically destroyed, orchid stems snapped, pots shattered. On my father's workbench lay a single teacup, identical to the ones Martha had used. Don't touch anything, Morris barked, pulling out his phone. But my eyes caught something else, a flash of white beneath the broken pottery. I pointed, and Morris carefully extracted a stack of papers. Bank statements. Emails. A second will, dated before the one we'd found in the safe. These are fake, Samuel said, examining them. They're trying to create a paper trail showing your father intended to sell the estate. Martha's handwriting, I said, recognizing the forged signatures. But the plan. This is all Jake. This is how he thinks. Henry appeared in the doorway, face ashen. Martha's gone. Her phone's disconnected, and she cleared out our accounts this morning. A crash from the house made us all jump. We rushed back, Morris drawing his weapon. The front door stood wide open. Inside, Jake stood in my father's study, hands raised as 2 officers trained their weapons on him. At his feet lay the open safe, empty. Looking for these? I held up the stack of evidence from the greenhouse. His eyes narrowed. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly. You and Martha thought you could forge documents showing Dad wanted to sell. Plant them in the greenhouse, make it look like he'd hidden them. Then discover them after destroying the real evidence. She's lying, Jake said to Morris. Everything in that safe proved Willow's been manipulating the situation. My mother was trying to protect our family's interests. By killing my father? By doing what needed to be done. Jake's composure cracked. You never appreciated what we were trying to build. A legacy. A real family. Not this mausoleum to your father's ego. Henry stepped forward. Where is she, Jake? Where did your mother go? Why? So you can betray her again? Jake's laugh was ugly. You're as weak as Willow's father was. At least Mom had the courage to take action. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, but this time with an image, Martha, sitting in what looked like an airport lounge, holding today's newspaper. The text below, last chance. Sign over the estate, or the real evidence about your father's death goes public. She's bluffing, Samuel said, reading over my shoulder. But Jake's smile told a different story. Are you sure about that? Mom kept very detailed records of her visits with your father. Every cup of tea, every conversation. Would you like the world to know how long he suffered before the end? How many times he begged for help while you were too busy to notice? The room spun. Morris was saying something about tracking Martha's phone, Henry was shouting at Jake, but all I could hear was my father's voice from his last days. Something's wrong, Willow. Something's not right. I'd dismissed it as confusion. We all had. Jake's smile widened as he watched me process this. Tick-tock, Willow. How much of Dad's legacy are you willing to destroy to protect your own? Martha's evidence arrived in a plain manila envelope, delivered to the estate by courier. Inside, I found photos, handwritten notes, and a USB drive that documented every step of my father's decline. The final photo showed him in his study, cup of tea in hand, dated the day before he died. The look in his eyes, confusion, fear, betrayal, made my knees buckle. You can't trust these, Samuel said, but his voice lacked conviction. They could be manipulated. Detective Morris examined the USB drive. The metadata's intact. These are original, unaltered files. Jake sat across the room, still in handcuffs but wearing that familiar smirk. Mom always was thorough. Especially when it came to protecting the family. Protecting the family? Henry's voice cracked. She killed a man, Jake. Your wife's father. She eliminated an obstacle. Jake leaned forward. Just like Willow's become an obstacle. But there's still time to fix this. Sign over the estate and everything goes away. The evidence, the investigation, all of it. Morris's phone buzzed. He stepped away to take the call, then returned looking grim. Martha's been spotted boarding a private plane to a non-extradition country. We're trying to ground it, but... Too late, Jake said. She's probably already in international airspace. Tick-tock, Willow. Once she releases those files to the media, your father's legacy becomes a scandal. Every newspaper, every TV station will run stories about the confused old man who died under suspicious circumstances while his daughter was too busy to notice. My hands shook as I lifted another photo from the envelope. Dad in his garden, looking lost among his beloved orchids. Martha's handwriting on the back, day 47, increased dosage. Subject showing signs of severe confusion. Subject, I whispered. She documented his murder like a science experiment. She documented your negligence, Jake corrected. The devoted mother-in-law who tried to warn you something was wrong. Who stepped in to care for him while you focused on your career. The grieving widow who noticed his decline but couldn't convince his daughter to pay attention. Samuel grabbed my arm as I lurched toward Jake. He's baiting you. The papers are ready, Jake continued. One signature and this all disappears. Mom releases a statement about a misunderstanding, returns to help manage the estate development. Your father's reputation stays intact. Everyone wins. Everyone except Dad. He's dead, Willow. But you're not. Think about your future. About the scandal this will cause. About how people will look at you, wondering if you knew all along what was happening to him. Morris cleared his throat. The planes cleared U.S. airspace. We've notified Interpol, but nothing will stick, Jake finished. Not without creating a media circus that destroys everything your father built. Is that what you want? To turn his legacy into a true crime podcast? I looked around the study, at the books Dad loved, the photos of us together, the garden visible through the window. Everything he'd built, everything he'd loved, tainted by Martha's methodical documentation of his murder. Time's running out, Jake said softly. Mom's given you 1 hour to decide. After that, the files go public. Every detail, every photo, every moment of his suffering. Is your revenge worth destroying his memory? Henry stepped forward. There has to be another way. There isn't. Jake's smile was triumphant. Mom made sure of that. She always does. My phone buzzed, another message from Martha. A video this time, showing Dad in his final days, confused and afraid, calling out for me while Martha's voice soothed him with promises to help. I'll need to see the papers, I said quietly. Willow, no, Samuel protested. But I was already reaching for the document Jake's lawyer had delivered. The estate transfer agreement that would give them everything they wanted. Everything they'd killed for. Smart girl, Jake said. I knew you'd make the right choice. I lifted the pen, feeling its weight like a coffin nail. In the garden, the last of Dad's orchids swayed in the breeze, survivors of Martha's destruction. Soon they'd be gone too, replaced by whatever monument to greed Jake and his mother planned to build. Just sign, Jake urged. End this nightmare. The pen hovered over the signature line as Martha's final text arrived, time's up. Choose wisely. The pen never touched the paper. Instead, I reached for my father's favorite teacup, the one still sitting on his desk, the one Martha had used for her final dose. What are you doing? Jake's smirk faltered. Something Dad taught me. I lifted the cup, examining its delicate pattern. About orchids. About patience. About hidden things. Samuel stepped closer, realization dawning on his face. I caught his eye, saw him reach slowly for his phone. Enough games, Jake snapped. Sign the papers, or Mom releases everything. You mean like this? I turned the cup over, revealing the tiny camera lens embedded in its base. Dad wasn't as confused as you thought. He knew something was wrong, so he started watching. Recording. The color drained from Jake's face. You're lying. The cameras were everywhere. In his teacups, his books, even the orchid pot Martha destroyed yesterday. I nodded to Morris, who was already typing on his phone. Every conversation, every cup of tea, every secret meeting about development plans. All streaming to a secure server. Impossible, Jake whispered, but his eyes darted to the cup, then to his handcuffs. Your mother was thorough, Jake. But Dad was thorough too. I placed the cup back on the desk. He knew you were planning something. He just didn't expect his own family to kill him for it. Martha's voice suddenly filled the room, from Morris's phone, streaming the server's contents. Just drink your tea, Richard. Jake and I have everything under control. Jake lunged forward, despite his restraints. Turn it off! Can't do that, Morris said, nodding to his officers. This is evidence now. All of it. You don't understand, Jake's voice cracked. Mom will release everything. The photos, the videos. Let her. I stepped closer, close enough to see the fear replacing his arrogance. Let the world see what she documented. What you helped cover up. Every file she releases will match perfectly with Dad's recordings, except his show the whole truth. Samuel's phone buzzed. Martha's plane just turned around. Interpol's orders. That's impossible, Jake said. She has diplomatic immunity. Had, Henry cut in, holding up his own phone. I just spoke with our family lawyer. Seems Martha's immunity was tied to my position on the diplomatic corps. The position I resigned from 10 minutes ago. Jake slumped in his chair. Dad, you can't. Can't what? Stand by while your mother faces justice? Like I did when she killed Richard? Henry's voice shook. I've done enough standing by. My phone lit up with a message from Martha, the last one she'd ever send me. You'll regret this. I typed back 3 words, watch the tea. The officers led Jake away as Morris played more recordings. Martha's voice filled the room again, documenting her crimes in perfect detail, while Dad's hidden cameras captured every moment, every confession. Every calculated move. The orchids, Samuel said softly. He hid cameras in the orchids she destroyed yesterday. She thought she was destroying evidence, I replied. She was actually preserving it. Every broken pot released another memory card. Your father, Henry's voice cracked. He knew? He suspected. That's why he changed his will, why he left everything in trust. I picked up the estate transfer papers, tearing them slowly in half. He made sure Martha and Jake could never touch it, no matter what happened to him. Morris ended the playback. We'll need your testimony. You'll have it. Every detail. I looked around the study, at the home Martha had tried to steal, at the legacy she tried to destroy. Let her release her evidence. Let everyone see exactly what kind of person she is. Samuel touched my shoulder. Richard would be proud. No, I said, watching Jake's police escort disappear down the driveway. He'd be heartbroken. But he'd understand. In the garden, through the study window, I could see the surviving orchids swaying in the breeze. Dad's final witnesses, keeping their secrets safe until the moment of truth. Just like he taught me. The verdict came down like thunder in the quiet courtroom. Martha's face remained stone still as the judge read out her sentence, but her hands trembled, rattling her handcuffs. Jake wouldn't look at me, wouldn't look at anyone. His earlier bravado dissolved into something smaller, more fragile. Henry sat beside me, shoulders bowed but steady. He testified against them both, his quiet voice carrying more weight than Martha's theatrical protests or Jake's rehearsed excuses. Outside, reporters waited with their questions about justice and closure, about healing and moving forward. They didn't understand. Some wounds don't heal, they just become part of who you are. Back at the estate, I found Samuel in the greenhouse, carefully tending the surviving orchids. New growth had emerged from the broken stems, tiny green shoots reaching toward the light. Your father's last letter, he said, holding out a weathered envelope. He asked me to wait until after the trial. The paper felt warm, alive somehow. Inside, I found a single page covered in Dad's familiar scrawl. My dearest Willow. If you're reading this, then the worst has happened, and you've discovered the truth about Martha and Jake. I'm sorry for the burden I've placed on you, for the choice I made in documenting everything instead of confronting them directly. But I knew they'd never stop, never be satisfied until they'd taken everything. The cameras weren't just about gathering evidence. They were about teaching you one last lesson, that truth, like the orchids we loved, requires patience, careful tending, and the courage to wait for the right moment to bloom. I've left you more than just the estate. I've left you the strength I always saw in you, even when you couldn't see it yourself. The strength to stand alone, to face hard truths, to protect what matters most. In the greenhouse, behind the broken pottery and Martha's destruction, you'll find something I've been working on. A new hybrid orchid, years in the development. I've named it Willow's Justice, because like you, it thrives not in spite of adversity, but because of it. Plant it. Watch it grow. Let it remind you that even in our darkest moments, beauty finds a way. All my love. Dad. Samuel touched my shoulder. There's something else you should see. He led me to the back of the greenhouse, where a single pot sat hidden behind the wreckage. Inside, a stunning orchid bloomed, petals white as truth, streaked with veins of deep purple like justice finally served. He finished it just before. Samuel's voice trailed off. The genetics are completely unique. It's officially registered with the Royal Horticultural Society. Your father's final legacy, and yours. My phone buzzed, a message from Detective Morris. Martha's private plane had been seized, her offshore accounts frozen. Jake's law firm had stripped his name from their partnership. Their carefully constructed world was crumbling, one piece at a time. I switched off the phone. Help me clean up this mess? I asked Samuel, gesturing to the broken pots and scattered soil. He smiled, understanding what I wasn't saying. Sometimes healing starts with simple things, dirt under your fingernails, broken things made whole, new life emerging from decay. We worked in comfortable silence, clearing debris and salvaging what we could. Henry joined us later, his diplomatic polish replaced by workman's gloves and determination. Together, we rebuilt what Martha had tried to destroy, making space for something new to grow. As the sun set, I placed Willow's Justice in the center of the greenhouse. Its petals caught the fading light, transforming it into something almost otherworldly, beautiful and resilient, like truth finally set free. Dad was right. Some things require patience, careful tending, the courage to wait. And some things, like justice and orchids and healing, bloom in their own time, in their own way. I touched a perfect white petal, feeling its strength beneath the delicate surface. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more reporters, more pieces to pick up. But tonight, in this greenhouse my father loved, surrounded by broken things growing whole again, I finally understood what he'd known all along. The most powerful legacy isn't in what we leave behind, but in what we help others become strong enough to grow for themselves.